Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well. So I had a little bit of a technical difficulty earlier, and I'd apparently set the first stream that I had scheduled to private, which is not exactly the move to make if I'm trying to have a public stream. But anyway, hopefully everything is good now. Sorry for the delay. I think this is like the first time I'm actually late for stream because of something like that, but if you don't count me just like muting, but maybe it's like in the same realm, all things considered. So, right. Anyway, welcome to tonight's stream. So, yesterday on stream, we went through 3 different videos. One was about the lore of Pinocchio and God by Jacob Geller. Then we transitioned into watching a video by Noctugal about the Valkyries of Elden Ring and comparing it to Norse mythology. And then we finished up with one video by Elden Tales about the wisdom of this stone. 1 second. And today I have queued up Elden Ring Wants You to Stop Hating Yourself by Polygon, then Elden Ring, The Psychology Behind the Game by The Censored Tarnished, and then, depending on how much time we have left, Elden Ring's funniest moments are also its darkest, and / or the rare moments when Elden Ring is happy by Z Voke. So, once again, my apologies for the delay. Hope you guys are all doing well. Scaleasy, nice to see you again. Iman, Dennis Carr, welcome in. It's you could say it's a countdown for the DLC trailer, aka the countdown for disappointments. But yeah, welcome on in. And Capenda, nice to see you again. This is like lies with wrong P. Okay. Stella, welcome in. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into that first video with Elden Ring Wants You to Stop Hitting Yourself by Polygon. What a fun game to play with your drunkles.
The funniest game to come. Elden Ring is the funniest game to come out in years, and you either agree with this statement outright and are a fan of From Software, or you think me mad. The Souls games have a very grim, gothic aesthetic. Piles of bodies, destroyed camps, warriors weeping over their fallen companions. It also has really big hats. Absurd comedy happens when a logical world is disrupted.
And let me know how the volume is for you guys. It's a little loud on my end, so I don't know if I needed to turn it down at all for you, or if it's just kind of a good balance against my voice, and or if my mic is still having problems, just let me know, and I'll try to adjust things there. Hey, Rick Val, welcome in. You wanted to say Elden Tales videos are great? Okay, cool. I do have some more Elden Tales videos queued up eventually, but yeah. Okay, it's perfect on Capenda's end. Thank you.
It's the sudden movement from coherence to incoherence. You think you know the world you're in, and then something bursts in and fusses all that up. For absurd comedy, it doesn't really matter what kind of world it is, just that it's consistent and clear, and then gets fucked up by something that contradicts that as much as possible. The stronger the coherence, and the more disruptive the incoherence, the funnier it'll be. That's why Fortnite doesn't really hit absurdity the way Elden Ring does. Its internal logic is watery and consistently changing, so it can be silly and fun, but it rarely feels absurd. Whereas
yeah, that's kind of a weird comparison to make to me because I've never played Fortnite. I have no idea what she's talking about, so I kind of feel like this misses the mark for me personally, but I wonder how well that lands for anybody else who has played Fortnite. Can anybody in chat chime in about that? And as for like the absurd elements of Elden Ring, it's kind of true that it can be absurd at times, and I think like that's some of the best parts about Elden Ring in comparison to some of the previous FromSoft titles. And like one of the peak moments of gaming for me was honestly getting teleported into the Caelid tunnel and then walking out of the tunnel to see the blasted landscape that was the rest of Caelid. Sorry, my dog is kind of acting a little bit odd right now. Oh no, he just wants to play. He's looking for a toy. Here. Come on. Yeah, and sorry, I just like to keep an eye on him, especially after like the whole epilepsy seizure episode, so he's fine, if anybody's curious. Just a little bit feisty. All right. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the whole Caelid misadventure was like an absolute peak moment of gaming for me, because it literally felt like I got teleported to a completely different planet. And if anybody's like wondering why my voice is sounding like this, it's because my dog is trying to tug me out of my chair because I'm holding on to a toy right now.
As Elden Ring built up this giant lion-maned cannibal, named him Star Scourge, and then put him on the tiniest horse possible. Peak comedy. Of course, that absurdity relies on another thing that's really important in comedy: the element of surprise. Comedy just isn't as funny if you can see it coming. And Elden Ring is a big, scary world with no handrails, literally. The difficulty is key in a lot of the funny shit that comes out of it. If a new enemy crashes your 1v1, this is just a more difficult battle. If it shows up and kills you, that's very funny. FromSoft has mastered a special type of comedy that relies on unexpectedness, but is the opposite of absurdism. It's called jokes. If you've just had this happen to you, your first instinct might not be, "Oh, FromSoft, how droll." And that's perfectly understandable. If you didn't know about knock-knock jokes and somebody walked up to you and said with their mouth, "Knock, knock," you'd probably think them mad. The core structure of a joke is the movement from incoherence to coherence, the setup to the punchline. In jokes and their relation to the unconscious, Freud's joke book, No, Really, Freud says that the effect of a joke comes about through bewilderment being succeeded by illumination. The setup should be unclear and lacking in information. How is a raven like a writing desk? But with the promise of finding a connection between the ideas, which is the punchline. Poe wrote on both. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Mikey.
Mikey who?
My key ain't working, let me in. Mikey answers the who.
Wow, I make a lot of really bad puns, and even I thought that was awful. Anyway, hey, howdy, welcome into the stream. You remembered an important question that you wanted to ask. When Lawrence is departing from Willem, it sounds like both of them are saying "fear the old blood." Is that on purpose, and why are they both saying it? So yes, it does seem as though that is on purpose, and the reason that they're saying it is that it seems to have become an adage of Bergenworth, and would later also go on to become an adage of the Healing Church, because they wanted people to respect the old blood and leave it alone, because it could have had disastrous effects. But fear isn't necessarily the component needed for that kind of respect. Willem is saying, "Hey, idiot, don't use the blood," whereas Lawrence is like, "Oh yeah, I'm not gonna, not be afraid of it, but I'm still gonna use it." And they just kind of all suffered the consequences for that. And hey, Hilko, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. And Astanex.
Who part. But if you're familiar with the structure of a knock-knock joke, you know the name must be loaded with a secondary meaning, one not yet obvious to you. You can't suss out how it'll be transformed into a punchline, so you're held in suspense. Then, when it's revealed, coherence. Each setup is meant to build tension, and the punchline is the release. They're really similar to jump scares in that way. But that's a different video. The joy of a joke lies in that spark of recognition, which is dependent on understanding the structure. This is why puns and riddles often overlap with, but aren't quite the same as jokes. And why so much of nerd humor relies on references. If you get the reference, you're experiencing something adjacent to that spark of recognition. Bazinga. Games as a medium have a perfect built-in opportunity to inject surprise, but it's rarely taken advantage of. Games are an inherently rules-based system. Players make inputs, and the game reacts in certain predictable ways. That's essentially what a tutorial is, teaching the player what behaviors to expect based on their inputs. That means devs can easily set up player expectations and just as easily twist them. Like Elden Ring, What the Golf is a master of gameplay-based humor. The game spends a few rounds teaching you to hold a button to whack the ball towards the flag. Then... well, now wait a minute, that's not what I thought would be flung. How whimsical. We're harmlessly moved from a logical world in which a person holds a golf club and hits a ball, into a wacky world where you're the ball, or a house is the ball, or the whole moves. And I know people say that explaining a joke makes it not funny, but honestly, this rules. And knowing how it works just makes me more impressed with the devs at Triband for understanding games and comedy so well.
This is kind of like a weird video to me right now because the title is Elden Ring wants you to stop hitting yourself, but it just seems like more of a tutorial on comedy to a degree, or jokes, I guess. And that's fine. It's just not what I was expecting at all. And I'm curious why they're focusing so much on Elden Ring when so far, like, so little of the video seems to be really relevant to Elden Ring. And part of what I mean by that is, like, pretty much a lot of the elements of humor that are present in Elden Ring were also kind of pioneered by Demon Souls and Dark Souls. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it seems like a little bit too elementary or reductive and not entirely, like, topical to me. So I'm not, like, super in on this video so far. So yeah, Jay Moore said for, like, the Fear the Old Blood stuff, it's kind of similar in effect to, like, a God-fearing Christian. Yeah. And Crispy Backwoods, welcome into the stream. You think they say it at the same time because Lawrence has heard it time and time again, like a child to its parent? Yeah, perhaps. It's like, all right, old man, shut up. I'm leaving already. The audience is maybe non-gamers. Yeah, it's kind of weird, though, because if you... I don't know. It's just kind of like a weird setup for me. Maybe I'm not on the joke yet. Who knows?
Elden Ring has taken this a step farther with what I've taken to calling environmental jokes. They share a basis with environmental storytelling, but environmental storytelling can be very static. For every one jubilant bread boy, there are 100 storytelling moments that rely on graffiti or skeletons or both. And jokes, as we know, rely on a change of mental state, a movement from incoherence to coherence. It's hard, maybe impossible, to tell a joke in stillness. Even comic strips use panels or captions as setups and punchlines.
Oh yeah, so when she said explaining a joke doesn't work, I feel like that's not entirely true. It's really all the delivery, and sometimes, like, jokes can actually be magnified when somebody explains it. Especially if they're kind of being condescending about it. Like, so if you make the whole, like, if you make an obtuse joke, maybe like a knock-knock joke isn't the best form of it, and maybe my delivery sucks right now because I'm not really intending to make a joke or anything like that, and I'm kind of bad at making a joke to begin with. But, yeah, sometimes, like, there's a lot of humor and repetition, and sometimes you can magnify the effects of a joke by over-explaining it, as though, okay, so this is... All right, hold on. I might need to, like, Google the actual words for it, because I would butcher it otherwise. Damn it. It sucks so hard when you know the thing that you want to talk about, but you just can't find the route to get there. I don't even know how to, like, Google this because I'm, like, failing to find the real words. Yeah, Cheers reference. Maybe that could be, like, a good example where, like, everybody knows your name. It kind of becomes a running joke, but I mean, that's not necessarily over-explaining something. I missed your comment, Howdy. Probably. Willem is like, fear it's unknown and dangerous, and Lawrence is saying it like, fear the thing you won't want to, except because this is the future of humanity. I feel like a word there makes it a little bit harder for me to parse. Oh, in Fallout 4, there was a Cheers reference on screen. Okay, that makes sense. Guy fails is to explain why explaining a joke is funny. Now that's funny. I mean, maybe this is the inadvertent joke that I cannot explain comedy. Which is kind of funny to me because I think in some ways streaming is somewhat analogous to being a stand-up comedian. Because in a sense, we're both like in front of an audience, although my goal isn't necessarily to make you guys laugh. Sometimes that happens a bit incidentally as like I fail to do things, especially like gravity deaths in a game like Lies of P or Elden Ring. Hold on. Damn it. All right, I'm just going to move on and like maybe look for it while the video is going on.
But the developers at FromSoft have an incredible understanding of how gamers behave. They know how to train players, how to control where we're likely to go, how we're likely to act. And they've perfected the art of environmental joke setups by making the punchline your death. Consider the teardrop scarabs from Elden Ring. They're a variation on Dark Souls' crystal lizards, which contain valuable materials, but which run when attacked and disappear quickly. Players learn that when they hear that magical sound and see that doo-doo disco ball, they have to rush in to get it. The first couple scarabs in Elden Ring are innocuous. They're easy to reach and they're full of goodies. Once the game logic establishes why you want to catch them, the devs begin to use them to puppet you around. If you don't approach this little friend from the right angle, chasing it will send you right off this wall and into the waiting cesspit of an ulcerated tree spirit, or into an ambush, or... When you take into account that these so-called scarab beetles really look like dung beetles, it makes it all the more absurd that you're working so hard to catch them. This is how FromSoft structures its environmental jokes. Whether it's a scarab, or an item, or a treasure chest, the setup is, maybe there's something good in this dark, decrepit world. And the punchline is that you thought there was something good in this dark, decrepit world, you dum-dum. And it works because FromSoft knows what you are. You're a little piggy, chasing shit. But like Knock Knocks, this only works if you understand the structure of the joke. You need familiarity with the logic of Souls games to see the humor in this. Otherwise, it just feels unfair. I clearly remember cracking open my first From Software game, Dark Souls Remastered, and waddling out in the world only to get flattened like an old banana under a heel. The moment I said, this game is bullshit, but didn't stop playing, that's the first stage of FromSoft fandom. Over time, I figured out that Dark Souls was very cleverly engineered.
Okay, so I don't know how familiar you guys are with stand-up comedians, but one of my favorite ones has like a subreddit, and he posts pretty frequently onto it. And he doesn't do it in all of his videos, but sometimes he kind of like goes on to explain the joke or like re-clarify it, and it can be funny. This isn't the best example of it, but this video was posted today and it kind of works. So let me see, just to kind of give you guys an example.
You guys got that?
Oh man, that's extremely loud. Let me turn this down a little bit. Hopefully that wasn't too bad.
Big old bowl, huh? Hell yeah, dude. What is that? What's in there? What does it taste like?
The Long Island one.
Okay, so Long Island food.
All of them.
Oh, it sounds like it's working. Good thing it's glowing. You probably would.
So like I said, this wasn't the best example, but him saying like it has got all the alcohol in it because it's working, like that's kind of over explaining a joke, but it was funny because the delivery was fantastic. And so you can over explain things and like have them be funny, I guess. Anyway, that's just kind of not an important thing for me to get stuck on, but anyway, I just wanted to disagree and be right.
After about the 20th time I got backstabbed while picking up a piece of candy, it became clear that I was the idiot. Why didn't I check the corner? You can see the boulder. Of course those fire barrels will explode. This is the second stage of FromSoft fandom, but it's still not a place where you necessarily perceive these things as jokes. Because after a while, it becomes even more clear. I am an idiot, and also this game is bullshit. Who puts backstabbing creatures in every corner? Who builds a city of rickety platforms and populates it with wide lads? Who does this? You see an item sitting there, seemingly unguarded, but because you're familiar with the setup of a Souls game, you understand that there must be a secondary encounter here, one that is not yet obvious to you. You probably can't suss out where the punishment is going to be deployed, so you're held in suspense. Then when it's revealed, coherence. You got me again, Patches, you bald. It's why when somebody expresses perfectly reasonable frustrations with a Souls game, sometimes really the only thing you can say is,
Get good.
you know, get good.
Yep. There
Like,
it is.
all you can do is give up or continue to work to understand how the game functions so that you can see why, yes, it is frustrating, but it is also very funny. Laughing is a fundamental social activity. The whole premise of inside jokes is to divide people, make those within feel like they have a tighter bond. And most comedy works similarly. Sharing laughter reinforces a sense of community by demonstrating who gets the joke and belongs, and who doesn't. Like a fun form of gatekeeping. Bazinga! This is the complicated nature of get good. It turns the basic advice and premise of the Souls game, a thing every Souls fan must overcome, into a moral stance. You either laugh at get good, or you take it too seriously because you're not a real fan. It's classic troll humor, which is meant to provide a sense of empowerment to the person perpetrating the joke. Any expression of earnestness or emotion means a person is weak, and being able to provoke that means a person is strong.
And not only that, I mean, some people definitely do take the get good mindset a bit too seriously. And I'm talking about people not on the receiving end of it. So it's kind of become like a meta humor joke that get good is used as an insult. And it's also used in that kind of self-referential way where we kind of all had to get good and understand that there's going to be shitheads who actually believe what they're saying. And we're just kind of like making fun at that mindset. So it's really interesting how it works on so many different levels sometimes. But yeah.
Comedy can be an expression of power. Sometimes we laugh to prove that someone or something doesn't have any power over us. The idea of a bully saying, "Stop hitting yourself," is absurd because you're not. You're not hitting yourself, you can't stop. That's really only funny if you're not the person getting hit. Laughter is also a necessary form of social connection. It can help you find like-minded people. It can reveal a power dynamic and build solidarity with those who are suffering from it. That's why the Souls games give you a little peek into other players' experiences with the spirits, the messages, the puddles. You learn from them and laugh and feel connected to other people being jerked around by the game.
If you play online. But anyway, Asenex said, or you could learn that magic is broken and skip the get good part. Not that you've ever done that. However, to counterpoint that, there's no magic spell for levitation yet, and you still can't get good over gravity, now can you? The puddles are extra great when they show up after something. Oh yeah, and that's probably like one of the like best design features. Like, you know, there's a kind of a delay on some of the puddles, but it feels like they intentionally delayed puddles showing up just long enough to like add a little bit of extra salt in the wound, or a little bit of maybe salve to the wound, because you at least you'll learn that you're not the only one that did something extremely foolish.
Understanding that power dynamic is essential to FromSoft's game-building philosophy. Hidetaka Miyazaki, who directed Elden Ring and a bunch of other Souls games, has explicitly said that these frustrating experiences are meant to be funny. It's hard, but never impossible, and there is that element of humor, that people might laugh when they get killed, that they might feel caught out by the game. Ostensibly, the game developers...
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised she hasn't like touched on the aspect of absurdity and its relationship to humor, because I feel like part of the reason Dark Souls and Elden Ring can be such humorous games is because of how absurd they are to begin with. I mean, even just setting aside the kind of pseudo post-apocalyptic worlds that you're kind of set into, just like one of the funniest things to me that's like ever happened for me playing a Dark Souls game, which in like the grand scheme of things is not that funny, but just so absurd that it's hilarious to me, is how the first time I went through the Ashen Hollow in Dark Souls 1 and got all the way down, or the Great Hollow, not Ashen Hollow. Once I got through the Great Hollow and went all the way down, like, you know, weaving in and out of all these tree branches, not falling to my death, getting through all the stupid little basilisks, and then finally getting to the bottom, I got punched to death by a gigantic mushroom. It's just like, of all the enemies to kill you, like the softest, weakest looking thing just hits like an absolute truck and can floor you. It's just so ridiculous. It's just hilarious to me. Classic, yeah.
Have the power. They're the ones setting up the joke, and we the players are the ones getting punchlined. And try finger tarnished, because you are the butt of the joke, and FromSoft wants you to feel that powerlessness. But what's wild is, we love it. We opt in for this treatment. It flies in the face of the supposed purpose of games, the power fantasy. Elden Ring is like the stage combat version of Stop Hitting Yourself. It looks like the game is punishing you, but you're the one in control. You can double down and push through, or go hang out on the Weeping Peninsula and get OP, or quit and never come back. And if people...
Okay, I like that little comparison there at the end, that Elden Ring is telling you to stop hitting yourself, but you're the one in control. So now the title clicks for me. It just kind of took a really long time to get there.
People scold you with "get good" as you walk out the door, well, that's their problem. At the end of the day, FromSoft wants you to have a good time and feel like you've really achieved something. They understand that in both comedy and perseverance, achievement feels best when there's a big change, a grand movement, whether it's between incoherence and coherence, or between weakness and power. The bigger the gap, the better it feels once you've crossed it. But you can always just watch lore videos, summon a billion friends to clear an area, cheese a boss, and still have a great time. Elden Ring is a great reminder that you can't take life too seriously. You'll never make it out alive.
Yeah, I saw that one coming. Alright, so I guess that's that for that video. It was okay. It wasn't necessarily something that I'm super into.
Oh, beautiful.
I literally cannot wait.
I'm also weirdly excited, very nervous.
Just slightly.
It's quivering.
I'm gonna try to go flat on your face.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright, so let me back that up.
Funniest.
That was Elden Ring Wants You to Stop Hitting Yourself by Polygon. So if you guys want to give them some support by liking and or subscribing, you can follow the link to do that there. 2Hit's favorite, like FromSoft goof is in the depths. That first slime trap, not just the slime trap, but the slime trap takes long enough that the hollow on the patrol reaches you right after the slime gets off of you. Now I kind of feel like I want to rewatch Trey Irby's like top 10 trolls for the FromSoft games. I think like my favorite troll, which is kind of like the biggest joke of all almost, is Miyazaki. When asked what starting gift does he choose for Dark Souls 1, he told everybody that it was the pendant. And because people are the way they are, they thought that there was like some deeper, grander, hidden meaning behind it. Like, oh my God, if the game director chooses the pendant, maybe there's some like secret that we can find out, and maybe we'll get like an overpowered item, or maybe like access to a new area, new spells, who knows. And so like this sent people on a tear to try to like find the utility behind what the pendant truly was, only for there to be absolute nothing. And part of me wonders if Miyazaki was trolling players by choosing the pendant and wanted that to happen, or if he just said that he liked to choose the pendant because there was no inherent advantage for doing so, and he kind of like wanted a bit of a rougher experience for himself, because I think both are fascinating and plausible possibilities there. Was that before or after the DLC? You know what? I don't really know when that interview came out. I would assume it was before, but it's kind of hard to say. Iman said, didn't the pendant help you parry manas? That is a different pendant. You're thinking of like the broken pendant for Artorias and Dusk. I'm talking about the starting gift pendant. It doesn't do anything. Hilka said, the only one that you felt got was after getting into DS1 was that first dude you talked to sharing his hyper-specific instructions ostensibly passed down to him. Could you be a little bit more specific? The first dude you talked to, hyper-specific instructions. Oh, are you talking about Oscar of Astoria? Yeah, okay. Okay, that makes sense. So you're talking about like the trap of the boulder hitting you that got you? Because I don't know if you've ever seen my AFK screen. I've got a pretty funny clip of that because the boulder gets reset. But anyway, all right, let's go ahead and transition into the next video. Kind of more on the psychology side of things here with this first video in Elden Ring: The Psychology Behind the Game by The Centered Tarnished. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. C.G. Jung.
Elden Ring is full of mysteries. Mysteries that don't seem to add up, or that have no dots connecting them. Some of these mysteries include, who really is Marika? A goddess? Puppet of the greater will?
Wait a second. Did I watch this before? Was this the one that was like entirely about Jung? Oh no. Okay. So yeah, this is, oops, a product of my fault because when I, like inadvertently screwed up the ordering of my React content playlist, it shuffled everything and I couldn't remember exactly every video that I watched because, hold on, let me pull that up for you guys. Actually,
The funniest game to come out in years, and you either
yeah, even though like I have this pulled up, it doesn't always show things properly for me. So like for this video, I've never watched it, but it says I've completely watched it. I know for a fact I haven't watched it. I haven't watched Honored Madman's video about the Pursuer, or Hidetaka Miyazaki on game design by Don RV, or Only Waifu's Future of Elden Ring's DLC and multiplayer, but it shows them as though I did. And so this one must have fallen through the cracks. And the next video is one that I
the funniest
actually
game.
kind of disliked because it was just kind of like freshman 101 Jung style analysis. And I felt it could be better. So I'll go ahead and just remove this now and then probably figure out a way to fill up some more time by looking at different videos. But all right, that just kind of changes the trajectory of the types of content that I was initially expecting for the stream, but that's all right. Let's go ahead and pivot towards Elden Ring's Funniest Moments Are Also Its Darkest by Zvoke.
The Albernurics have to be some of the silliest enemies I've ever seen. I mean, look at them. They were tormented very badly. This is their first generation. Or our guy Alexander, just casually boiling these bodies within him. Since the oh is one of my favorite themes, I've created a progressively worse list of the funniest lore that's also the darkest. To start, Ball. The steel ball. Well, okay, it's actually not made of steel, it's...
Yeah, the steel ball is absolutely hilarious, and like going through the Elden Ring subreddit, like every couple months there's somebody that posts a video of them trying to dodge the ball in the most convoluted ways and just getting knocked down and falling to their deaths. So they'll like try to jump onto the railings and then the ball will still like clip into them and they just die. So this is a great one. Also, there's like, I think the Zoli videos where they like set up like 100 balls versus like 10 different bosses and like the balls just literally steamroll them, you know?
alive. The Nox were well versed in mimicry. Silver Tears were a mockery of life. They were to be reborn and reborn all over again. The Mimic Tier was made to copy a figure that would become a lord. Therefore, Control-C, then Control-V, another lord. But it actually lacked any will. So, instead, it became a ball. I'm sorry, I just can't take it seriously. I mean, FromSoft could create in-depth lore to anything.
I mean, they could put, I don't know, like a literal ball of lightning in the game, and it would have a whole story, right? Well, if you look into the files, they're actually called something, and it's a wisp.
If going by the name, these silly floating guys could be the lost souls of the dead, which fits perfectly as Nokron is a place out of the influence of the Erd tree. When someone dies, an exiled soldier, people really like messing these guys up, their souls return to the Erd tree. But what happens when you're too far away from it? Well, you become a dumb, stupid lightning ball. Okay, we actually don't know, and it's almost entirely theory, but it's heavily implied. Also,
And it is also very fascinating to me that the will-o'-the-wisps are kind of frosty in effect. I mean, you don't get the frost status effect from being hit by them, but I mean, just look at them. They're like snowflakes and whatnot. The ball versus boss fight. Can I link it, please? Let me look for it real quick. Let's do it this way. Oh, 10 balls versus bosses. So it wasn't even 100. I couldn't remember the number. I thought it was 10, but it seemed too few. So this is by Nameless Ring 7 months ago. 10 balls versus bosses. So let's go ahead and clip that and put it into chat. There you go.
Don't know, and it's almost
Oh, you're saying the will-o'-the-wisps are from Might and Magic 6, Mandate of Heaven?
entirely theory, but it's heavily implied.
Also, check out Mad Luigi's video. He actually brought this to light a while ago and just goes into way better detail, so check it out.
Have you ever actually looked at what the Fire Monk's campfire is made of? And if you look closer, it's actually a head. By looking at
Yeah, and this is part of the item description on like the B-Rack's candle stand, B-Rack, whatever you want to call it.
a certain weapon, it explains this. The most hollowed of prelates, or in normal human terms, the most holy of bishops. This holy figure found the monks to be too casual with their religion for the flame. To disprove these mere amateurs, he beheaded himself as a lesson of true faith, and had it fashioned on a candle stand. I can't make this up. So the as described lazy, arrogant monks were like, okay, cool. So instead they used it to create bonfires. Now, when someone said they used wings to fly?
So the prelate thing is also interesting to me. Go figure. I'm interested in Elden Ring lore. That these kind of incantations scale on faith, which is very consistent throughout, Elden Ring, that all the fire incantations are incantations and therefore like faith-based. But when Rykard gets a hold of fire incantations and hexes and whatnot, and incorporates them into his like style of Gelmir sorcery, they scale off of intelligence, if I'm remembering correctly. I might not be, but part of the reason this fascinates me is that faith is often conflated with the faction of the Erd Tree and whatnot, and the Erd Tree's forces would also go on to become these fire monks. So like the Flame Guardians, which wear the minor Erd Tree Guardians masks and whatnot, they are supposed to have tended the flame. So these guys were all originally Erd Tree forces, but then they kind of got allured by the fire essentially and kind of switched allegiance. So it's really interesting to me that it wasn't something that just seemed to bewitch them. It seems like there was actually a bona fide reason for them to have that much faith if B-Rack, or whatnot decided to dismember himself to shine as an example to his brethren, I suppose. That prelate sure showed them. You got him. Yeah. Are they pure int or int/faith? You thought they were the Elden Ring's hexes. I can't remember if they are intelligence as well as faith, like the Rykard ones in general. They might be both. But my point is most of the other fire stuff is pure faith-based. And that also goes for Destined Death as well, which is arguably related to flames. But yeah, they're both just checked. All right, thank you. So yeah, like... it could be that they're int and faith because they're based off of hexes, which scale off of intelligence faith, which kind of makes the most sense. But just the fact that fire as a sorcery is, fire isn't sorcery, but it kind of is because we have like the Karian Sword of Night and Flame, which I guess technically does also scale off of intelligence and faith. It's just kind of like got a weird niche in the world there.
bonfires. Now, you know when someone said they used wings to fly? I didn't think they would build a balloon. And one of the delightful details is the wrapping for the balloons. They're made out of bat wings or some other creature. Okay, no, they don't actually match any of the creatures, I checked, but they probably created a separate asset that's supposed to resemble bat wings.
As we move on, we're now to these mysterious graves. And I love how in the world of Elden Ring, anything can be a weapon. I don't know, how about we just cut a hole out of this and turn it into a shield?
I saw this detail on Reddit, and the design of the shield and the tomb are pretty similar. Although, of course, they're definitely not the matching pieces, but the idea still stands. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily believe that this was like cut out of a tomb, although I can definitely see it. And I have noticed the similarities myself, that this kind of looks like it does almost have fingerprints going on in the middle. I believe these are supposed to be related to a real life style design of Tombstone. And part of the reason was the holes may have been cut into them to stop them from being toppled over by the wind. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know what exactly those graves or tombstones are called. I think they're called like moaning tombstones. I might be wrong, which might like tie into mourn, because in Japanese, quite often the R sound isn't carried over from English when it gets what's the opposite of romanized? Anyway, when it's taken from English and put into Japanese, the rhoticity is often dropped. So mourn could easily become moan. So moan, moaning. And then vice versa, if you're working from Japanese, and if you have like an elongated vowel sound, that could be an indicator of rhoticity. So you could have moan in Japanese and ostensibly get mourn from it as well. Transliterated, thank you.
Although, of course, they're definitely not the matching pieces, but the idea still stands. Pretty cool if it's true.
Well, on to the next box, and it's time for the silly section. That's the name.
And for every horrible abomination that really makes you wonder if Miyazaki's okay, there's an equally goofy looking creature that still makes you wonder, hey, Miyazaki, are you okay? And just think back to when you first played Elden Ring. You encounter horror, disgrace, frog? The player base didn't hold back. We killed 9.4 billion of these guys. And even the developers roast them. Wielded by Albinaurics lacking dexterity. The only point of similarity between the two is the shape. I love it. These guys can't get a break. Well, I mean, of course, we're talking about humor, and guess what? FromSoft isn't above puns. Soldier Jars. Soul Jars. Yeah, that's the name for the spirit summon. But the interesting...
Yeah, that's I thought like one of the best localizations that they did, Soul Jar of Fortune. The Japanese name for it, I think, was pretty bland. Let me double check for you guys. Oh yeah, this is kind of a funny way to talk about it. So let me make it a bigger. So we have like special attack Yaro Tachi ashes, and so like special attack could be understood as like a suicide attack, like kamikaze, because these dudes explode, and so they're just like almost like the equivalent would kind of be like kamikaze bastards lost ashes. So calling them Soul Jars of Fortune kind of does a really good job, because it gets across the idea that they're kind of soldiers, with like the first two characters representing like suicide attack, like kamikaze style attack. So yeah, I don't know, that's just like probably one of the most brilliant localizations I've seen in a long time. Okay.
The interesting part is that's the translated joke. As John Dark on Reddit mentioned, what it literally means in
Well, maybe if I let the video play, we could have gotten that context for free, huh?
Japanese is suicide mission bastards, or kamikaze attack bastards, which also apparently is a direct translation to the A-Team. I did not expect
I didn't know that.
You ever look at an enemy and go, you'd be good as a weapon? Well, so did Miyazaki, like a bunch of times. See that giant? Yeah, his spine would do some damage. Or bones, these would make just great weapons. You know, why not horns? Or how about this ant? We could poke people with its spine. Or how about we just do bugs in general? Or, you know, the wax that corpses produce, that's a thing. Oak dragons, they're in this game, and scales sharpen them or use their claws. I mean, if that's a viable option, why not just use one of its heads? Speaking of heads, do you think a jaw... Yeah, jaws work too. Or entire skull...
My favorite thing about that...
Speaking of heads, do you think a jaw...
like ancestor jawbone X or whatever it's called is that these are like very clearly herbivore teeth, yet that's supposed to be like rendering flesh apart. It's just kind of extra funny to me, the imagery that goes along with it. Paul says kamikaze is not a taboo word for them. You didn't know that. So this is kind of like a complicated topic to talk about because kamikaze means different things. So hold on, let me try to like phrase this properly. In English, we called them kamikaze like fighter pilots, but that's not necessarily how the Japanese referred to them. They compared them to the kamikaze, which means divine wind. Like kami means god, divine, spirit, etc. And kaze means wind, which is actually, let's just pull up the Wikipedia. It'll be a little bit easier. Oh, it's going to pull up this thing. Okay. Let me enhance. Kamikaze, divine wind or spirit wind. So, hold on. Is it going to talk about the history? Okay, definition and origin. The Japanese word kamikaze is usually translated as divine wind. The word originated from Makara kotoba of Waka poetry, modifying ise, and has been used blah, 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 to refer to the major typhoons that dispersed Mongol Koryo fleets which invaded Japan under Kublai Khan in 1274 and 1281. So, kind of similarly as to what happened with the Spanish and the English, Japan was going to be invaded by this absolutely massive Mongolian fleet, and they didn't really have a fleet of their own that could like forestall them, because at that point in the timeline, like they weren't really a maritime based country. Well, to even call them a country at that point is a little bit not entirely correct, but anyway, like the whole point is they're going to get invaded, but they needed essentially like an act of God for them to kind of survive this oncoming invasion, and that act of God arrived for them in the form of what they called the kamikaze, which is a, you know, divine wind. So there's like a kind of superstorm which dashed the Mongolian fleet and essentially eradicated them before they could land in Japan. So that's kind of like the origin of the term. So for the Japanese people, a kamikaze is something that would protect like the motherland, essentially. And so so the formal term used for carrying out suicide attacks during 1944 and 45 is Tokubetsu Kogekitai. Oh, sorry. Tokubetsu Kogekitai, so, which literally means special attack unit. This is usually abbreviated as Tokotai, more specifically air suicide attack. So they didn't call those people like kamikaze themselves, but for everybody else, they kind of represented the idea of the kamikaze of like protecting Japan. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you're more curious about that, it's pretty easy to look up. Yeah, as Astanex is saying. So yeah, just to answer like Paul's question directly, kamikaze is not necessarily like a taboo word, but I mean, yeah, it's just kind of within the context of like what it actually means. It's not a taboo, and if you're talking about like the war stuff, as long as you're being respectful and like not using kamikaze as like a slur or something, I can't imagine it would be like too contentious. But yeah. Hey, I'm in. Oh, I've actually already watched the psychology video. Spoiler alert: I did not like it pretty much at all, and I didn't finish it the first time through, and I kind of forgot that I had watched it, so it kind of slipped through the cracks. So my apologies for the little debate that I may have pulled. Scowly says Divine Wind is 100% something a grandpa would call a fart right before he lets it rip. Indeed, or even after he lets it rip. All right, here we go.
Yeah, jaws work too. Or entire skulls. There are plenty of those. These guys can turn into anything. How about a Yep, weapons work too. Yes, okay. A giant finger. Melania's arm. The stuff that makes up Astel. Morgoth's blood. How about all of Radagon? Just kind of shape him up. And oh, the Prince of Death. Yeah, take some of his amber from his body, throw it in the staff, and there we go. That was a lot, and there are over 40 weapons made out of just creatures and enemies in the game. FromSoft, are you okay? Leave it to Elden Ring to have the most just lovely of characters be the one that stuffs corpses inside himself and then boils them in lava at Mount Gelmir. These jars are the vessels with the goal to become a great champion. They defeat a warrior, casually just eat them, and then rinse and repeat. Eventually, they will go to a minor Erd tree where an avatar will smash them, releasing the dead warriors where their souls will be absorbed into the Erd tree. And well, what is Alex doing taking a bath? Well, he's here to mend the cracks within his body by using the lava's heat. But there's a little side effect, and that's that there are corpses within him who are just completely getting boiled and melted. We can actually see what these corpses go through when he's defeated,
They don't
as
mind.
we're rewarded with his innards.
When we look at both of these items, we can actually see the mushy flesh that is melted onto the shard of one of the pots. And for his innards, I think that's like some intestines and maybe a heart. It's gross.
One of the core fundamental aspects of Elden Ring's lore is marriage.
Husband and husband. Wife.
Marry each other. Marry your brother. Marry yourself. Have a turtle marry Radagon and Renala. Although, trust me, don't divorce, because one will lead you to creating horrific reborn children, and the other will literally eliminate death from the ecosystem. Or worst of all, you lose your dog. I mean, that's devastating.
Yeah, and as 2Hit says, there's some extra red hair that gets added when you get the fully powered shard, and many people wonder if that's supposed to be related to Alexander eating the remnants of Radahn after their battle, because I think there's like 3 tiers of shards that you can get from Alexander, but I might be misremembering. There might be like a super weak version before the Radahn fight, and then like a powered up one after the Radahn fight, and then like the super strong one is if you complete all of his dialogue at Fair Missoula and then kill him.
While we're on marriage, what's something more affectionate than to model a torture machine after your lovely wife? Yeah, that face is actually based on Tanith, who is Rykard's consort. Rykard wished...
So I know there was another video that came out recently. Was it by Kite Tales that like talked about that lady? I haven't watched it yet. It's been suggested that I add it to the queue here, so I'll probably get to it soon. Actually, I might be able to watch that next because we should have a bit of extra time today. So maybe I'll do that. Okay.
To bring warriors to Volcano Manor to consume, as it would make him stronger. So this machine is what would do that deed.
Okay, you guys said there's just 2. Maybe I'm conflating Little Jar Baron's thing in there as well. Thank you.
And actually, even the living meat version of Tanith would do the same. She had us challenge warrior after warrior to see if we were worthy enough to meet the king. You know, be consumed by Rykard pretty much. So it's actually kind of cool how her quest ties pretty much directly to the death machines, as they're just her with less steps. And you know what? I'm glad. We were actually able to flip the table in the end. Do you know what though? At least with Elden Ring's success, it never fell to corporate late-night marketing. Wait, why is there another tile? Wait, why is Stephen Colbert talking about Elden Ring? Elden Ring. Please stop. This is bringing mainstream attention. People, like, actually know about Elden Ring. I bet when Miyazaki picked up a dead project called Demon Souls, and it flopped, like, really bad, he wouldn't realize by sticking to the insane difficulty he liked, some of the biggest figures in media would be talking about his project.
And hey, maybe you have your own Demon Souls, and in 13 years you could have Stephen Colbert talking about a game that literally has a guy that eats poop in it. So yeah, just go for anything. I'll see ya.
The funny thing is, like, if you really know anything about Stephen Colbert, this probably is one of the lesser surprising things, because he is a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, and it probably wouldn't surprise me if he was a fan of George R.R. Martin as well. And well, I don't necessarily expect he has, like, a lot of the time to play games or anything like this. I think if he was younger and, like, had exposure to it, he probably would have been a huge Elden Ring nerd as well back in the day, but who knows? The biggest Lord of the Rings nerd. You might be kind of factually correct about that, but anyway, yeah, that was a pretty good video. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a like, and I know Zvoke has some other stuff that I'm interested in, so I'm gonna go ahead and sub to them as well. So let's go ahead and share it with chat. And before going into Zvoke's next video, let me look in my little list here for the Iron Maidens thumbnail. I know they're not called Iron Maidens, but I can't not call them that. Okay, so yeah, so it's Kite Tails. Who is this woman and who is that baby? Elden Ring. So Zvoke seems to believe that that's Tanith. I never really gave too much thought to it. I could potentially see that, but all right, let's go ahead and dive on in.
Have you ever wondered what the deal is with the Abductor?
I don't like how the closed captions get turned off sometimes after, like, every video.
Virgins, like where they came from. Have you ever wondered what the deal is with the Abductor virgins, like where they came from, why were they made, why did they all have that sad looking face? I hated the Abductor virgins in Elden Ring. They were like my least favorite enemy. I would stand afar and kill them with magic because I just hated being grabbed by them. It was so scary.
Yeah, these things are pretty terrible to deal with. In my 1.0 playthrough, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to go to Altus Plateau this way because I just don't want to fight these things because they're so freaking tough. But for anybody who's on a more up-to-date patch, if you use the Silver Mist of Nokron, that can just chain stagger these things, and you can kind of deal with them much more safely now, at least.
But at the same time, they're probably the enemy that has stuck with me the most visually, because there's just something so eerie and curious about their appearance. So there's a whole lot going on when they attack you, which is easy to miss because of how quick the animation is and everything that's going on. First, we have the inner arms, which are a contraption of serpents that come out and grab you, which is fitting given the supreme deity of Volcano Manor being a serpent. And you also have this mist of blood that comes out, presumably originating from a prior victim, or maybe it's just the fuel that they run on. And then you have the doors in the interior, and they are all covered in slabs of meat. And for what purpose, it's unknown. For all we know, these machines could be alive in some way, and the slabs of meat are the food that they run on. And maybe that makes the blood mist their fuel exhaust, kind of like a car.
That's kind of an interesting thought, and I'll admit that I have not given too much thought about the mist or like the little meat doors on the inside. I thought that's just kind of like supposed to represent like literally inside them, kind of like a figurative stomach or something like that. But yeah, anyway. Astinex and Iman are saying that the Abductor virgins are weak to electricity, and that it doesn't matter how strong they or weak they are, they will always get stunned by 8 hits of electricity. So that's obviously better if you have a weapon that is capable of doing 8 attacks in quick succession. So just get wrecked if you're trying to do the Unga Bunga Bonk build with a great sword or something like that.
If this is the case, this might explain why there are so many of them out of commission that are lying around Volcano Manor, because no one has been feeding them. This second volume of Future Press's Elden Ring book that has the bestiary, it goes over all the enemies in Elden Ring. This book describes them as horrific automatons created under the supervision of Praetor Rykard to capture live victims and return them to Volcano Manor. This book really doesn't explain a lot about them, it just talks about their design and what they're weak to, where you can find them, and it doesn't say anything about the way that they look, so that is why I'm making this video. There are a couple of variations in their design. Some have retractable chains.
All right, so like one of the weirder things is if they are meant to transport people to Volcano Manor specifically, then why the hell are there still 2 or 3 active ones next to the fortified manor in Leyndell? And if Leyndell was attacked by Rykard, would it have been in their interest to kind of like decommission these automatons? Maybe they just kind of like forgot about it, or they weren't worried about it. I think one potential headcanon somebody can have about the Leyndell one specifically is that if Peter Rykard was a kind of a ruthless justiciar, then perhaps that could have been part of like the penal code in Leyndell, just to transport wrongdoers into Volcano Manor for like Rykard to torture and whatnot. Who really knows? The meat is pinned to them, kind of like a paddy wagon. Kind of. Oh yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. So maybe it's supposed to be cushioning for the people that get abducted? Maybe they stuck in through that chest on the Weeping Peninsula that just jammed themselves in there, I'm sure. And they climbed up those ladders themselves too, huh? You thought they were primarily war machines. Yeah. That is kind of the vibe that I got from it, but they do show up in really strange places. So I think Leyndell is kind of the strangest in terms of like the meta lore of like the faction-based alterations. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me why they're still left alone there. But we do have that one, I think it's called the Abandoned Cave in Caelid, that has like hundreds of these, essentially like their corpses, their remains of these, within this just random ass cave in the midst of Caelid. And if I remember correctly, that's also the one that has like the Clean Rot Nights at the end of it. It's filled with like Scarlet Rot. So did Rykard just like house or manufacture them there in Caelid? We have a couple in Raya Lucaria, which isn't like too surprising because he's a Carian. It's yeah, very fascinating things. So curious what else Kite Tails says about them here.
Chains outfitted with guillotine blades, and others have Geyse's wheels, which is a torture device also used at Volcano Manor. All of the models feature the same figure, a very serene, sad-looking woman holding an infant. And to me, this is the most mysterious thing about them. Forget the slabs of meat. Who is this baby and who is this woman? I have always thought that the Iron Virgins were modeled after Lady Tanith. This has been a long-standing belief of mine since I saw them, because
so that's kind of cool because that's what Zvoke was thinking in the video right before this one. So I wonder if Kite Tails had a change of heart there, because just like the language used there.
Who else would they be modeled after? Lady Tanith was the lady of Volcano Manor, the ruling proprietress. She was the most important person in Rykard's life, and visually to me it looks like they are the same. They kind of have the same mask, headpiece. And I think that their design tells a story about her. I think this is some environmental storytelling to fill in some of the blanks about her life. First off, they are called virgins, and this is probably because Tanith was childless. This was a title that was actually given to Queen Elizabeth I, who produced no heirs of her own, and thus she was called the Virgin Queen. And
this kind of takes on a funnier tone when you consider like the 1.0 description for Datakar's Woe. I guess I should pull that up. Not Dar, Daedakar. Oh, Oh, maybe it was called something different in this version of the game. Okay, no, we found it. All right, disturbing likeness of an old noble whose skin was flayed. He smiles with a serene tenderness, increases damage taken. This soft-featured man's name was Datakar, and he was one of Captain Rykard's paramours, as well as an attendant in his inquisition. He would test new methods of torture first upon himself, making a gift of his pain and first-hand knowledge to the one he loved. So, obviously this got retconned quite a bit there, but I think when you compare that idea to Tanith being a virgin, it's just kind of a little bit humorous and or perhaps tragic. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that in the chat right now? Hey, Captini, welcome back in. You thought that maidens transporting people was about the teleportation? You think that's why they're all over the place? So yeah, I do think that's a strong possibility, and Patch kind of alludes that the teleportation aspect may have been like a one-time use thing, or like more of a pristine form of the Iron Maidens, or whatever you want to call them. So maybe that's why like the Abductor virgins hold the concept of virginity implicit within their title. I don't know. You didn't know Rykard went that way, poor Tanith. Well, it got retconned, so maybe he doesn't anymore.
Tanith's adoption of Raya seems to support this idea that Tanith didn't have any children of her own, but she clearly was maternal enough to be a good, loving mother to Raya. So if we take the machine's name and its design, you have this woman on top, and then you have her abdomen, which is filled with snakes, and it is inhospitable for anything that it pulls into that area. And I am interpreting this as Tanith's womb being barren. Either she could not have children of her own, or she miscarried, or she just actually was a virgin because she was never able to consummate her marriage to Rykard because of his very changed appearance, and thus she was never able to give birth to children that she desperately wanted. Because if you look at the baby that she's holding, this baby doesn't look like it's sleeping. It looks like it's either dead or it's stillborn, or it's just supposed to be representative of babies Tanith wanted, because I don't otherwise know why this woman would be so sad. I just think the design is a very clever way of telling us, the audience, that Tanith cannot, for whatever reason, have children. The design of this enemy is very...
Well, I think if you want to go the route of the children and the virgin aspect of it, if the Iron Virgins are virgins, that would imply that this child isn't necessarily hers and it belongs to another, which might tie into that whole Raya thing that was mentioned briefly a moment ago. It looks like Patches just because it's bald. All right, I see what you're saying, Captini. And hey, Chris Hall, welcome into the stream. How you doing?
Sleeping it of telling us, the audience, that Tanith cannot, for whatever reason, have children. The design of this enemy is very clearly based on the Iron Maiden torture device, which is a staple for any torture museum. These horrific iron coffins were said to have been used during the Inquisition.
So Amin asks, why were so many item descriptions changed after 1.0? I cannot answer that question because I don't really know the exact answer as to why. Some guesses of mine could be that it may have been likely that the translators were given a draft of the script that was not the final draft of the script, and by the time 1.0 came out, the Japanese draft was already translated, but that version of the draft isn't what was available for them when the game went gold, and so certain things had to be added in after that, because there are just so many descriptions which don't really match up with a lot of the lore. And if you go back through like the 1.0 versions of the spells in Elden Ring, they barely have any flavor text at all. So there might have been hold on, let me pull up some footage for you guys. There might have been just like not enough information at the like original launch date, because the game did get delayed, and that would be like my best guess that this is kind of a product of mistimed development woes as opposed to translation issues. Although, yeah, I mean, those things can still persist, but why am I not like searching? What is going on? Japanese. Okay, so apparently I didn't take footage of like the 1.0 spells and whatnot, but this should suffice for now with the remembrances and boss items. So, hold on, let's see. So Storm of Darkness, it's an Ash of War, but I mean, this has 2 lines. It just tells you that it gives you Magic Eruption, which isn't the same. It calls it Storm of Darkness. So, like, there is a lot that was unfinished by 1.0. Oh, they call him the Misbegotten. Interesting in 1.0. I mean, I had to have known that at one point, but... Alright, so Fortis Axe's Lance drive multiple lightning stakes into the ground. Fortis Axe's Death Storm causes black lightning to strike around the caster. So, just a lot was unfinished, it seemed, at the time. 2Hit says, there seems to be a lot of cut content that would have made for a fairly different game with the Silver Tier and Saint Trina quest stuff, as well as the Frenzy Flame stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and as Chris Hall said, they gold games early. And for those who may not know what like going gold is, that's the time of development when they are done enough with the game that they'll actually print it to discs and send it out to be distributed. That's what going gold means. Like in Bloodborne, so much changed from 1.0 and 1.01 because they were still fixing and stripping stuff out. Yes, exactly the same with Elden Ring there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and then 2Hit makes the good point that you do need a lot of time to manufacture and press all the discs to release them by the time available for the release date. And with the way that the dev cycles work now, you can still get a lot of work done after production starts and before the game goes actually live, and you could potentially fix a lot of those issues with the day one patch, which is why day one patches now are kind of almost a certainty at this point whenever you buy a new game, as lamentable as it may be.
In which the guilty would be enclosed and subsequently fatally pierced with iron spikes lining the doors. Although it's likely a myth that the Iron Maiden was actually ever used in real torture, there is a historical account that might be real about a very, very old device called the Iron Apega, and this was a device that was built by the Spartan tyrant Nabis, who created this machine to execute his victims. So Nabis would tell people to go up and hug his wife, Apega.
That's pretty cool. I don't think I knew about this one specifically.
And the doors of the machine would latch out. The arms would latch out and grab them and crush them. And this sounds a lot like what the Abductor virgins do. Last year, I uploaded a video in which I talked about some of the mythological inspirations in Elden Ring, and I drew a connection between Tanith and Rykard to Jezebel and Ahab, who were said to be the most evil king and queen in the Bible. There were a lot of similarities between these characters. Ahab was called the most evil king in all of Israel, and he was very wicked, and Rykard is, of course, arguably the most evil character in Elden Ring. And they each married a...
Oh boy, that's a fun one to try to argue when you have such greats to contend with as Moog and like the Dung Eater or Moog. Yeah.
A foreign woman from a different land. Rykard married Tanith from an unknown land, and Ahab married Jezebel from the Sidonian kingdom, which was a Phoenician city-state. Ahab and Jezebel worshipped Baal, which was a deity that sustained itself on blood sacrifice, child sacrifice included. And likewise, Rykard and Tanith also sustained their snake deity on blood sacrifice. And both Baal and, is it Agli or Igli, however you pronounce it,
Eagle Eye. Just make everybody upset.
both of these gods were fed by blood by means of fire. And visually, I think that Rykard looks a lot like King Ahab as well. So this has been my thought for quite some time now, that Tanith has been an inspiration of the Phoenician priestess Jezebel. But while working on this video, I came across something that further supports my theory. And when I looked into it, it also revealed some more disturbing things about Volcano Manor that I originally overlooked. So when you finish Volcano Manor, Patches gives you a pair of dancer's castanets, and it's this little finger percussion instrument that is described as having belonged to Tanith when she was dancer. The passionate dance comprises no seductiveness, but merely a dignified beauty, and we know that when Tanith was a dancer, that is when Rykard fell in love with her. Castanets are very widely known today as a percussion instrument that is used in the Spanish dance, the flamenco. While it's possible that Tanith could have been a flamenco dancer, I don't think that was the case. It just doesn't seem like that's the vibe she gives. She doesn't give a very passionate vibe that I would associate with a flamenco dancer. So, but I could be wrong, but I don't think she was. Instead, very conveniently for my theory that Tanith was inspired by Jezebel, castanets are a much, much older instrument that originated from the Phoenician civilization. Yes, and the Phoenicians are the ones that brought it to the rest of the world because they were a very big merchant civilization. And again, the Phoenicians are the same group of people that Jezebel hailed from. And in Phoenician culture, women, much like the men, were able to lead in worship services. Well, as worship services, I mean ritual sacrifices and whatnot. These little castanets were used in the ceremonial and religious displays performed by the Phoenician priests. So it's very possible that Jezebel, being the daughter of a priestess and having as much autonomy as a queen or a princess because the priests worked in the same capacity as a monarch in Phoenician city-states, Jezebel could have used castanets in her rituals that she led. And that is more so what I think these dancer castanets might represent. I think there's something much, much older than the flamenco percussion instrument. I think that this is just another clue that she has ties to Phoenician origins.
So I think that's pretty interesting. Not necessarily something that I can fully agree with, but that's just because I don't think there's enough direct evidence to fully support it one way or another. But that's also something that I don't disagree with inherently either. I think there's enough room for that to be kind of a comfortable headcanon for somebody to have, but it just doesn't tip enough scales for me to just fully support it, if that makes sense. So, Bella, welcome back to stream. You said torture devices are so interesting to learn about. All right, I'll keep my eye on you. And then Two Hit said, it's such a weird quest line that Patches falls in love, gets rejected, and then goes back to bedmen. And then Chadwick said the Phoenicians also historically invented pants, and it was the first recorded bifurcated garments we understand today as the true pair of pants. Interesting. I had no idea about that. The pant lore is real.
Or inspirations. As I spent way too much time reading about Phoenician culture and history for the purposes of this video, I got way off track. I learned something else that answered another question to another video I uploaded last year. I uploaded a short video about why there were living jars under Volcano Manor, and I proposed this quandary to my viewers, why this graveyard was here and why there were so many jars here. And while there were a lot of really creative answers given in the comment section, I
kind of forgot that there was a graveyard there in Volcano Manor. That might be useful information for me. Yeah, so I'll spill the beans a little bit here, just a little bit, in that, like, on my next video, I want to talk a lot about, like, death and destined death and the timeline of all that. But the fact that there is a graveyard in Volcano Manor, and it was controlled by Rykard, might be pertinent information as to the relationship between death and the lands between, and how that might have meant to coincide with destined death. And I feel like the graveyard's existence within Volcano Manor raises the questions of when the manor was first erected. I know some believe that Volcano Manor predates the age of, like, Godfrey and whatnot, because it has, like, potentially Banished Knight imagery within it, but I don't entirely know how I feel about that, so I could, like, cross that bridge when I get to it. But nonetheless, just the location of graveyards and their functional purpose within the lands between, I think, is a very important and fascinating topic on its own. So kind of glad that she inadvertently brought this back to my attention. Chadwick says, fashion's your favorite lens through which to view history. It's art, science, farming, manufacturing, diet, and everything. Oh, you should get in touch with Teen Sith, because she's also very interested in that topic as well. Lots of anthropology to be found. All people wear clothes. Not my little cousin. Anyway, that's a joke. My cousin's, like, in his 20s. He's a doctor now. But I was honestly thinking of myself as a kid. Or just, like, how children go through naked phases. Dennis said, you've always wondered if the living jars existed before the shattering, since they seem specifically tied to the minor Erd trees. So, oh no, Pandora's box of lore here. I am strongly of the opinion that the minor Erd trees existed pre-shattering and are not born of golden seeds, but that's kind of an extremely touchy subject that I don't want to get fully into right now, at the very least. But setting all that aside, you might be able to argue that the living jars existed within the time of Godfrey, depending on how you feel about the gigantic living jar outside of the Caelid Colosseum. Because if Colosseum was, like, funneling the remains of its dead into that giant jar, it would suggest that the jar was around in Godfrey's time, since the Colosseums were used in that time period specifically, and they fell out of use during Radigan's time. So hopefully that helps you.
I think I may have stumbled across something that really ties all of this together. The Phoenicians horrifically used child sacrifice in some of their worship rituals, and this was usually done in a response to extreme situations like famine and war. But it has been confirmed that, yes, they absolutely did engage in child sacrifice. And the sites of the remains of their victims where they were buried are called Tophets. And these burial sites were located in their own separate precinct outside of the general city area. And they held the remains of all of the jars that held the remains of the sacrificed infants and children. As I was looking at photos of these Tophets, they really struck me as being reminiscent of the graveyards in Elden Ring, the way that they are so haphazardly thrown together and the way that they appear clumped. Even the urns that are covered with these large slabs of inscribed stones called steles, the urns plus the steles and the way that they're all crowded, it looks a lot like the disorganized mess of graveyards and headstones that I see in the game. And in photos of these excavations, you can see how the urns are located in the ground here, and it gave me the same visual imagery as the living jars next to the gravestones. And I don't know if this is kind of like, what's it called when, confirmation bias? I'm not sure if that's the right thing, but because I already saw one thing, I was trying to see another thing. This might be a little bit of that. But my main point for bringing up the Tophets is that it might possibly be another connection that Tanith has to Phoenician origins. And it might now give a very different, very dark meaning to the figure in the Abductor Virgin. This weeping woman, maybe she's not sad about the baby she couldn't have. Maybe she's in some way remorseful about her role in these blood sacrifices. This would explain the juxtaposition of having this gentle, serene woman holding a baby and then this chamber that is supposed to crush you to death and spit out your blood. This would explain why the two exist. I think it really fits the theme and the vibe of Volcano Manor. It might make a little bit more sense rather than saying, okay, Reichard wanted to make a machine based on his wife's barren womb. Because that seems extreme even for Reichard. That would be such an insult to Tanith. I also
Not only that, I feel like a lot of dudes tend to try to turn as much of a blind eye as they can to that kind of thing. And oh my god, just the idea of somebody trying to make a kind of ode to their wife's barren womb, just that feels like so incredibly tone deaf that it's absolutely hilarious if it's true. And I can only just imagine how many women would react positively to that. Could you just imagine getting that for an anniversary present for a wife or girlfriend? Oh man, just talk about stepping on a landmine.
Came across
and hey, Andrew Hunter,
urns
welcome back
that
to
were
stream.
Excavated from a Tophet, and apart from noticing that these urns looked similar in design to the living jars, there was something here that really jumped out at me. Two-handled, plain buff pottery burial urn with bulbous body contains bones of children dedicated to the goddess Tanit. Tanit was a Carthaginian goddess, and Carthage...
Okay, so now I'm a lot more on board with the potential connections there, because Tanith. So this is starting to make a lot more plausible sense to me than I was originally giving it.
Was a Phoenician city-state. Tanit was also the consort of Baal, the god worshipped in Phoenician culture. Do you see how all of this is coming together? So not only do they share the same name, Tanith was also married to a deity. And the Carthage Tophet, which has been protected and is a World Heritage Site, is a children's burial ground that at one time, thousands of years ago, was dedicated to Tanith and Baal. So is it possible that the graveyards that we see in the game are in fact modeled after these Tophets? If we can make all of these connections and say, okay, yeah, maybe the designers did pull a little bit of Jezebel and Phoenician culture, and yeah, they did picture the Tophets and the urns. Did they make their way into the game in the design that we see here? I really like investigating the background of things that I see in games and movies and media. I like knowing the backstory to things. I'm a detective at heart, so this is just an enjoyable video for me to work on, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I'd love to hear your opinions on this subject. I just wanted to talk about this because it was something on my backlog that I had put together a while ago and just wanted to kind of finish. So yeah, I want to also thank my channel members. Thank you so much for your support for my videos and my work. And if you'd like to sign up to be a channel member, you can do so on my main page. That's all I have to share for now. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Alright, so that was a pretty good video there. I'm going to go ahead and link it for you guys if you want to give her some support as well. Alright, now... Right, okay, so one aspect of... Damn it, what was it just called? Carthage? I don't remember. Anyway, the kind of burn pits that were represented here in Tanit and like their connection to Baal might have been... And I could be like mixing up my history lessons here for a bit, so forgive me if I'm wrong. Could have been part of the inspiration for depictions of hell in the Hebrew Bible, where they weren't necessarily depictions of hell in like the kind of super common Christian lake of burning fire sense, but they could have been oblique references to the kind of burn pits where they would, you know, essentially toss infants and whatnot and we're essentially like the gutters of super ancient cities. So depending on like how strongly you want to take some of these stories, it might also be worth examining that aspect to them and seeing if that aligns more to Elden Ring in any way. And if you want to compare that kind of city state to what's going on in Volcano Manor, then should Volcano Manor potentially represent hell? Of course, I might still be misremembering things, so like you don't have to literally do that, but maybe it aligns. I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of like one of the dangers I feel of reading too strongly into outside sources of lore, which is why I tend to treat them more as like inspirations rather than like one-to-one parallels, which isn't to say like this was a wrong connection to make. I think it's very valuable, and it opens up a new avenue of lore for the people to explore, which I very much appreciate. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed the video, and that was a pretty good transition from Zvook's last one right there. So hope you guys enjoyed that one as well. And Elden Enthusiast, welcome back to the stream, and Buster Suds, welcome into the stream. All right, let's go ahead and transition back into another one of Zvook's videos with the rare moments when Elden Ring is happy.
This game is sad. I mean, not a single character smiles, except for Rhea.
Oh,
or I
no.
bet you didn't even know Radon had a cat. It's a little bit of cut content, but it's kind of adorable. And even the fact that there's an NPC ending that can actually save all of the Albinurics. So, I've made a list of the progressively happiest moments in Elden Ring, since it's honestly so rare. To start, I've gathered some of the cutest item descriptions. This group of wolves were actually chased away from their pack, but they eventually found comfort with a nameless Tarnished, and that's you. Now you are their hunting companions.
So, well, I don't entirely disagree that it could be our Tarnished. There may have been another Tarnished that the wolves could have served before us. We just don't really know. I don't necessarily think that's entirely likely either, because then the question arises of when was that Tarnished alive? Was this a type of Tarnished that was like when Godfrey's warriors before all of their grace was divested? Was this like post-shattering when Tarnished came back? We don't really know, so it seems unlikely. But anyway, just wanted to, be a contrarian, I suppose.
Or even the fact that these rainbow...
Okay, yeah, Captini has it. Gehenna, yeah, that's the word that I was struggling to come up with. It's taught to mean hell is really near Jerusalem, which is kind of like what I was talking about. Okay, so I might have been misremembering which was which. Rule 1 of Elden Ring lore, never say when. Yeah, pretty much.
Rainbow stones were used to entertain children in the lands between. I also like that these gremlins spawn in a pair because they like each other's company. And finally, the inside joke that the prawn sold is actually a crayfish. So when you do get crab, the game has to clarify that it's not some other animal, but actually a real crab.
Okay, Castle Morn is pretty horrific, but hear me out. I think it's kind of a good ending. The Misbegotten were servants and pretty much slaves their entire lives. But they revolted and took back the castle. Literally for the first time, these poor guys were actually in control. And even to top it off, Edgar arranged for his daughter to escape, and she was able to leave successfully.
Just don't talk to her. This video is about happy endings.
But let me know what you think.
This little detail here,
Yeah, it was definitely a happy ending when my dumbass Tarnished character walked into Castle Morn and then slaughtered them for no reason, just to get a sword.
Absolutely love. Ronnie is a powerful character. I mean, look at her stature. Surely she isn't sitting on a pile of books to seem taller. Yeah, you can clip in and see that her height is being raised by a bunch of books. They probably just didn't want to make a new chair, but nonetheless, I think it's kind of fun.
So let's move to an actual happy ending, or at least one where someone doesn't like horrifically die. And Witch Hunter Jaren seems to kind of avoid all of that mess. Eventually you help him eliminate Selin, which I don't know if that's good, but once she's killed, you've pretty much helped fulfill a long overdue promise.
Or, you do the other thing.
And he actually gives you a gift. There's also a little detail when you kill him, and he mentions E.G. Beware.
Which means he still cares about his friend. The fact that Jaren doesn't end up with his soul ripped out of his butt or being turned into a ball is a massive win.
Just like Gowry's dog. Yep, that's pretty much it. It doesn't attack and even has a collar. I like it. Or the chill dog in Land.
Actually, I have seen the dog attack people before, and I legitimately thought that it didn't have like aggro coded into it, but apparently it does. I was really surprised to see that happen.
And From Software always adds enemies that never really attack and just kind of hang out, like the crow in Bloodborne. Oh, and since not one, but two people...
Wait, there's a dog in Landell that doesn't attack?
Or the chill dog in Landell. From Software always adds enemies that never really attack and just kind of hang out, like the crow in Bloodborne. Oh, and since not one, but two people mentioned this on Reddit, I'll add the wolves chasing the beetle. It's pretty happy, I'll admit it. Surprisingly, there's actually an NPC, or dog, that when you attack doesn't even get mad. After hitting Muriel, he doesn't take any offense and then offers advice on handling your emotions. He honestly might be one of the nicest people here. Let's look at an ending that might not just save the character, but all of the Albinurics. After talking to Latenna, you agree to bring her to the Halig tree to help fulfill a promise. And she turns into a summon, not sure how that works. Eventually you come across her big sister, I mean that literally, and she gives her the birthing droplet. This tiny detail is massive. What it implies is by supplying this item to her sister, she'll be able to create life for all Albinurics, pretty much saving them. As theorized really well by Seg's Signal on Reddit, the armor, shield description, and her size similar to other demigods points to this actually being the mother of the first generation of Albinurics. But, as said, they're life forms made by human hands.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know about that, especially because Latenna does refer to her as sister. I would need to double check the Japanese if she calls her like elder sister or younger, but I don't really think it matters too much in either case, to be honest. And yeah, mentioning that they were like made by human hands just kind of does imply, I think, that she might not be the mother of all like first gen Albinorics, but I do think it's a neat idea. And yeah, okay, I'll leave that there. So Bella said her personal favorite item description is the ritual blood pot that says Moog apparently drenched people in blood as a pastime when he was a youngin'. I never read it that way, to be honest. I thought that it was kind of the other way around, that Moog was being assailed by the spirits within his blood, or like being assailed by spirits because of his blood, and that might have been like the childhood memory he had. I would want to double check and try to read it your way too. Dennis never got what was happening in that quest with the big lady. It's kind of not really well explained, but apparently the Albinorics can't really procreate naturally, and so they're said to come from like ripples and metals and whatnot, and are supposed to be a kind of synthetic life form that's created by human hands, and may allegedly be without the grace provided to other living creatures by the Earth Tree. And so because they don't seem to have this kind of innate grace or gold, it might be that they cannot reproduce, and that might tie into things with like the gold and silver butterflies and glintstone gold and silver fireflies and the glintstone fireflies that I talked about briefly on last night's stream. But beyond that, there's all this other stuff between like gold and willpower and fate, which might be related to this stuff. And Albin Nork is kind of an unfortunate localization here. They should be understood as like silver people, but orc implies gold, but that's not necessarily there in the Japanese. Anyway, my point is they're unnatural creatures, so they cannot reproduce naturally. Moglore special, you know you wanna? After a while, I don't know, like there's a lot of other stuff that I want to cover first at the very least. Bella reread it and you definitely interpret it wrong, lol. You always imagine the baby Moog laughing at people being eaten alive by blood monsters. I'll be honest, I really do like the imagery of that one a lot more, and in many ways it does feel more along the lines of Moog, but yeah. Sorry.
So the way I see it is by providing this birthing droplet, this mother will now have the ability to birth or somehow create true Albonurics who will be born with no deformities, saving the species. It could also mean they escape this weird experimental cycle. This might actually be one of my favorite details yet, and we all know Radon learned gravity magic so he can ride his horse. But he had a cat! I know, the long-tailed cat talisman specifically tells us that Lacrima is the beloved pet of General Radon. I downpatched the game to get this description for myself, as they removed it in future updates, but I didn't go far enough, and the version that it's in isn't available. Although, still the description plays into the general theme of Radon loving animals. If you look into it, it can be found all around him. Here's another ending up for debate. I also think the Jellyfish Kids is a happy ending. When you first acquire the Jellyfish Ashes, it's stated that it's glad to have your company. As we know, this is the soul of a kid named Oriella. She's prone to tears and is looking to reunite with her sister so they can see the stars together one last time. Eventually they do meet, and they're able to see the stars together for a final time. And you're also a good person because you never killed jellyfish, right? Oriella and her sister had graves, and Castle Morn is full of tons of similar ones, with a bunch of jellyfish who don't attack, meaning they're also likely to be kids. So I'm glad to hear none of you out there ever attacked any of these guys, because why would you? One of the least suspecting people I would think would have a happy ending is the—
Wait. I kind of zoned out because I was looking up the Lacrima details, but he was saying that all of the jellyfish were kids. I might have just kind of misinterpreted that.
Oriella and her sister had graves, and Castle Morn is full of tons of similar ones, with a bunch of jellyfish who don't attack, meaning they're also likely to be kids.
Okay,
So
at least he says likely to be kids, not that they necessarily are. So I don't know if I would agree with that, just because, I mean, I don't think there were specific graves to denote children's graves particularly or specifically. I was trying to avoid using specifically twice, but anyway, yeah, I don't know if there are particular graves for children is essentially what I'm trying to say, but yeah, I don't know. Never hit a friendly jellyfish. I've done it on accident. Always run away from the less friendly ones? Okay. 2Hit says the jellyfish are all implied to be dead children. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, maybe there's an implication, but I don't know. I didn't necessarily pick up that vibe myself at the very least.
None of you out there ever attacked any of these guys, because why would you? One of the least suspecting people I would think would have a happy ending is the Walmart version of Patches.
Oh man, I forgot. So part of the reason I struggled to think of what I was trying to say in the Kite Tales video was that I did wish that she talked a little bit more about the additional features of the Abductor Maidens, because they've got like a bunch of balls on chains, which hold on, let me try to syntax here. The balls and chains on the Abductor virgins, which like spin around and look like flails, might have been meant to symbolize like planets or something like that, and that would have been cool if she went into detail about those, but it's okay. The other stuff that she talked about was fascinating enough on its own, and don't ask me why that just popped into mind right now. I can tell you.
Glad to hear none of you out there ever attacked any of these guys, because why would you? One of the least suspecting people I would think would have a happy ending is the Walmart version of Patches, Gostok. He tricks you, tries to kill you, and not to mention stalks you 3 separate times. Although after freeing him from Godric's rule, he doesn't know what to do with himself. But if Nefeli's quest is completed, he'll be under her rule now, and later we find out he enjoys having a leader. He's able to scavenge all the bodies he likes. That's kind of weird. But now he's stuttering and is embarrassed on how he actually enjoys having a ruler. This character over here can end up as one of the happiest endings or one of the worst. Our poor Bach was pushed from his home because he was so ugly. This self-hatred escalates to the point where he wishes he could be reborn and have a new appearance. Of course, you don't take that route, right? Instead, you find the voice of a mother who calls him beautiful.
You're beautiful.
Which reminds him of his own mom, who always called him beautiful. He now has the confidence to function again and wishes to work under you. Finally, it's Raya. She's the one that actually smiles, and I don't even think it's intentional. I think that's just kinda how the lizards look. Anyways, we find out that Tanith is her mother, and her father was a glorious king. that's Rykard. After giving her part of a womb that she was born from, she finds out she was made from a horrible ritual. Then she wishes for you to kill her, cause her mom has been lying to her whole life. But no, instead you go kill Rykard. And later she appreciates you letting her live. After coming back, all that is left is a note, saying how
Yeah, appreciate us letting her live. That's exactly how it went down.
she's on a journey now, to carry on her mother's work. That's not a good thing, but she wishes to be the proud daughter of Tanith, mentioning how kind you have been. What you have done is not just save this character, but allowed her to do more. I love this next quest because it has collateral happiness. Nefeli Lu has it pretty tough. After finding out the frog genocide was done by her dad, she confronted him and was casted out. During this, we're also helping out our guy Kenneth, who...
Hey, hold on a second. They weren't frogs. Those were first gens. Maybe there were some frog corpses in there, but...
She confronted him and was casted out.
This is misinformation. It's fake news.
During this, we're also helping out our guy Kenneth, who can't even rule over a simple fort. So he apologizes to you for wasting your time, and is now looking for a new ruler. This is where Nefeli comes in. After giving her the Stormhawk King, which reminds her of her first hawk, it gives her the confidence to try again. A little later, we come across Kenneth, who appoints her to become the new ruler of Limgrave. She mentions how if you do wish to become a lord, she'll help. And that is exactly what happens, as her summon sign is available before the Godfrey boss fight, the place where you become the Elden Lord. Meaning, not just Nefeli, but Kenneth and Gostok end up having a happy ending. So I love these moments when they do happen. Unlike this video, there's a lot of horrible things happen to these guys. Check it out. It's not fun. It's not happy, I'll say. Anyways,
my man should check out and make the happiest moments in Bloodborne video. There's lots of them, right, guys?
I'll see you. Bye-bye.
So, oops. There we go.
This game...
That was a good video. I'm going to go ahead and link it for you guys in the chat. Give it a like. All right, there we go. If you guys want to give Zvoke some support. Scowleasy asks, what's the trigger to get Nefeli into the throne room? You've never gotten her there. So it can be a little bit buggy. I think it is a bit more consistent now, but you need to first exhaust Roderica and Hugh's dialogue in the round table hold when like Nefeli is there essentially. And then you talk to Nefeli and hold on, I guess. Okay, so follow Nefeli Lu's questline up until you start at the Albinorg village, do the Albinorg village stuff, then go back to the round table hold. She'll like be all sad and crap. Then exhaust Hugh and Roderica's dialogue so that way Nefeli can talk about like talking to Roderica. Then you either give her the potion or you give her the Stormhawk Dean, which is obtained from the Precipice of Anticipation Chapel, I believe. Or is that the... Yeah. You don't give her Dean, you give her the King. And then once she has the Stormhawk King, she's like, oh, this reminds me of my first hawk. And then you're supposed to teleport back to Stormvale Castle. And if you've already completed everything else with Gostok and or Kenneth Height, then Nefeli should appear in the throne room with them. But you can teleport to the site of grace at Godric's boss arena or the one before that and like reset the area if it doesn't appear, and then she's supposed to. But yeah, that's kind of like the train events which is supposed to complete your quest line, but apparently it hasn't worked for everybody, and I don't know if that's like partially a console issue or what. Two Hit says her quest doesn't reach that point until you hit the mountaintops, if you remember correctly. It's such a long time for that quest to finish. Maybe? I don't know if you need to necessarily hit the mountaintops. I know you can finish it before doing the kiln stuff with Melina, but I believe as soon as you begin to burn the urge, that's like the fail activation part. So hold on. That might be a lie. It's either defeating Morgott wrecks the quest. Well, hold on. So if you defeat Morgott before clearing the Albinorg village, then you'll fail it. You need to like talk to them Felly there before Morgott, and or complete her quest line before burning the Erdtree, although I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of that's kind of like the two big failsafe events on the quests are when you first go into Altus Plateau, that'll change some things with like the Radon Festival kicking off, and or defeating Morgott in Lane Dell. Those are like the two big world state changes that are obviously not when you burn the Erdtree or go to Fair Missoula. 2-Hit just checked. She won't migrate to the throne room until after you've killed Morgott. Okay. So it's not technically the mountaintops, but close enough. I see what you're saying. Hey, Mr. Yada, welcome back in. And Aaron Weiss, nice to see you again, too. All right, so that was a good video. Now we have a bit of time. I'm not entirely sure what else I would like to watch right now, though. Okay, this will be a good one. What Elden Ring is like for somebody who doesn't play games. I'd originally considered adding this one to the list earlier, but I felt at that time I didn't have enough time for this. So let's go check out Rasputin's video.
Over the past...
Okay. And this is something that was kind of an interesting topic to me in general, so let's see. Wait, have I watched this?
Over the past few years, I've had my wife, more boomerly known as the lady I live with, try out a handful of video games in order for me to get a better idea of what they're like for people who don't spend much time playing them. These informal experiments not only have given me a better understanding of some of the obstacles that exist for those with little to no experience with games, but also have been intriguing explorations of what goes into learning the language of gaming. As a result of these experiments,
So I feel like he may have had his wife try Dark Souls first and then she like quit a couple years before this. And if that's the case, then I feel like I might have watched this video on stream before already.
My wife went from being entirely unfamiliar with typical game conventions and mechanics to having a decent grasp over how games work and what they expect from players. She even took an interest in a couple of titles, playing them far beyond what I asked her to do for these videos. And she was well along in her journey of going from a non-gamer to a gamer. And now... it's been a year and a half since she last picked up a controller. As it turns out, time never stops moving forward, a fact that has become especially apparent since adding a baby we live with to our household. Life gets away from you fast, but now we've had a few good nights of sleep and are ready for another informal experiment. While I assume she has retained some of the skills she built up through previous experiences, this gap almost certainly will lead to her being rustier than before. So clearly, the best way to ease her back into things is by having her play Elden Ring.
I'm ready.
Okay, no, I definitely remember her voice now. So, whoops, I screwed up by not having another video that wasn't on my list. That's 2 in one night. That's kind of crazy. Whoops. Okay, so anyway, we'll make another pivot. Let's go with something a little bit completely different with AAA games need greed by Frogwater. Sounds slimy or scummy or something. Yeah, and Stella thinks we watched it too. Okay. Blame it on a lack of coffee? That's what you do when you make a typo? Nah. And Aaron Voss was 30 minutes ago in the stream. Get wrecked. You feel like the one guy from Radon's army who somehow ended up down in Shifa River? What dude is that was in Don's army? Is it like a corpse or is it like a real dude? I actually don't remember. Alright, so AAA games need greed by Frogwater.
Money! Why does a company exist? It's to make money, to ensure its future well-being and continued growth. When it gets large enough, that is. It doesn't matter what a company starts out as, the original intention, the roots. When a company is publicly traded, they exist to create profit for their shareholders. Companies are not friends, they're not people, and any semblance of humanity comes from dorks in marketing. As much as the internet might have wanted Wendy's to be a sassy, internet-savvy redhead, as much as I like the new Pop-Tarts campaign with the Adult Swim crossover and the new mascot's weird fascination with getting people to fucking eat him alive, we all know what's up. The fuck if I don't want a Pop-Tart after this.
Hot fudge makes you hungry, see? It's always snack time when you get a piece of me.
This applies to video game companies too, and we all know this. Publishers and developers are not friends. They are producers, and we are consumers. What some gamers might not consider at times is the business side of it. You might be thinking in your feeble head, I know you need to make money to make stuff. Go there! I just think creating a game as a multi-billion-dollar company is a little more complex than some people give it credit for. First, let me explain a little something to people who have no idea about money. I know this might seem like baby stuff, but not everybody knows about this. When a company gains an investor, that investor gains a percentage of the company to keep and trade as a speculative investment, or just because, gosh darn it, they love that product and they want to see it do well. Grr. Businesses then can use this money to scale their operations. In the case of video games, it's to purchase subsidiaries and to create larger and larger games. Now, investors aren't too bad when there's an exclusive controlled group of them, but when a company is publicly traded, imagine the whole world has the opportunity to invest in it. It gets chaotic fast. Being publicly traded, although it provides bans that could, in theory, make her dance, the ultimate risk is that the company is no longer completely autonomous. I feel like I just spit. I explained the ideal of investing, but reality can work differently. Investors put money into a company, the company can then fund greater projects. Maybe the company has some great ideas and products that propel them further, or it was just a flash in the pan.
So I'm assuming he's going to like talk about this to some degree, but this kind of ends up becoming an Ouroboros where in order for the company to continue to grow, it needs a continuous amount of investment, or more accurately, incentives for investors to keep investing into the company. And this becomes the driving force of its continued growth. So the company stops essentially focusing on company things and starts focusing on investor goals, which might not be the best thing for like the overall health of the company, which is a little bit counterintuitive, because if a company isn't healthy, why would an investor want to keep investing into it? And I think perhaps like one of the best examples that I can give of this right now would be the whole situation with Blizzard Entertainment. And sure, they got like bought up by Microsoft, so you know that there's a whole like extra layer of things that are worth consideration. But anyway, for the more simplified form of this kind of argument and tangent that I'm going to go on right now, back, let's say 20 years ago, like Blizzard, 20 years ago, Blizzard was like one of the top gaming companies, had like one of the best reputations in the entire market. And fast forward to now, and that reputation has gone down the toilet, and you can't even say it's being flushed down the toilet because it's getting clogged. That you can't even flush the toilet to like make the reputation go down any worse. So anyway, why is this important? Because Blizzard is focusing so much on the kind of short-term investor side of their goals projects. Their products, I feel, have been suffering greatly in regard to games like Diablo Immortal and Diablo 4 especially. It feels like almost every other week I'm hearing a new kind of controversy about how Blizzard is mishandling what should have been like one of the easiest slam dunks of their careers. All they had to do was make a functional game, copy and paste the best features from like Path of Exile, Last Epoch, but they were just completely blind to what their competitors were doing. Then they've got like all these other like game-breaking bugs, and they're kind of delivering a subpar quality experience when their main competitor is a game that's literally free to play. So they've really got their heads up their asses over there. And to tie that back into the whole short-term outlook thing and like the whole driving a market with investors, the reason why I think that's actually tied into it is that Blizzard didn't want to pay a lot of its developers a competitive salary, and over the years those developers gained some experience at Blizzard and then were poached by other companies like Riot that were more willing to pay higher numbers for their talent. And now the people that are actually making the games at Blizzard don't seem to be making them at the same kind of quality that the fans would expect. Now, in the short term, Blizzard probably saved a lot of money by skimping on salary costs and not giving their employees the most competitive of wages. But in the long term, they're really losing a lot of their fandom because people are extremely dissatisfied with Diablo Immortal, Diablo 4. They've been dissatisfied with WoW for years, but there's such a strong sunken cost fallacy, they can kind of like continue to get away with it, and just found different ways of milking and exploiting the players. And now nobody even cares about World of Warcraft. And yeah, so anyway, hopefully that like starts to make that message a bit more tangible, where things might be good in the short term, in the long term it might not work out, because essentially, in my estimation, focusing on the short term is like the equivalent of being penny wise but pound foolish. And since I know I have like a lot of non-native English speakers in the stream, to say that somebody is penny wise but pound foolish is just kind of a saying, which means that rather than incurring like a larger cost and like paying for those features up front, and it's like a larger number, a lot of people will go with lower quality products that will end up costing them more money in the long run. So one example of this comes from like Terry Pratchett's Discworld books, where you have Captain Grimes, who's like on the Night's Watch, and one thing that he would like to do is buy a really good pair of boots that would like last him for a lifetime, but they cost like $50 or something, and he never has $50 to buy that lifelong pair of boots, and instead he can only afford the $5 pair of boots that doesn't even like last him a full year. So he can never get out ahead, because over like the course of his life he's going to buy like 20 pairs of these $5 boots and spend twice as much as he could on like the $50 pair, because not necessarily because he's penny wise but pound foolish, but just because like it's the cheaper option, it's the one that he can afford. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at there. Yeah, the never-ending pursuit of economic growth means that there's always going to be that never-ending hunger, which is kind of why I likened it to an Ouroboros a moment ago. Hard to believe there was a point in time where Blizzard was the gold standard. Seems like a lifetime ago. Yeah. You were literally typing the Grimes boot quote, and that's awesome. And yeah, Stella says, the growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. I'm surprised I haven't really heard it mentioned quite that way before, especially since you put it in quotes. Hey, 00083, how's it going? Nice to see you again. All right, going back to the video now.
Either way, eventually that growth will stop. When an investment stops growing, it makes no sense to keep your money there. Investors take out their money and companies deflate in value. The money that they were using to expand businesses just goes away. That would lead to layoffs and worse employee accommodations. That would lead to lower morale. That would lead...
And damn, you don't even need these kind of excuses to lay people off. I think it was Meta the other day announced like a 1,000-person layoff and then a $50 billion stock buyback. My numbers might be wrong for both of those figures, but they literally announced them, I think, on the same day, or at least within a 24-hour period of time. And it's like, if you have $50 billion, I'm pretty sure you could have paid for the salaries of 1,000 workers for a hell of a long time, rather than like the stock buybacks and whatnot.
That would lead to layoffs and worse employee accommodations. That would lead to lower morale. That would lead to worse games. That would lead to worse profits. That would lead to larger company purchasing them or bankruptcy. It's fucking brutal, dude. Investors don't fuck around. They love making money they don't need. Investors have a pretty short-term memory, too. Faith in a company can erode.
Yeah, that's true. So Amin asks, what do you think about the Tencent investment in FromSoft? Honestly, I try to keep my nose out of the business of companies and who invests into what, mostly because it's kind of none of my business and doesn't really... this is kind of like a naive thing to say, and I acknowledge that much. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who invests in the company. As a consumer, really the only thing that matters is the end product. And of course, if you have the luxury and the privilege to be able to afford it, the whole kind of ethics behind how products are made might be something that you can consider as well. But like I said, that really does come from a place of privilege where you're able to have other options to turn to. And even then, there's not always the guarantee that those other options are going to be as ethical either.
After just one misstep, if you're not on the level of a company like Apple. They make shit from a butt, but people still buy it. I'm exaggerating. They're nice phones. They just intentionally make their shit hard to fix, so they always have to, have you mail their phone to them, and you have to upgrade it. Fuck Apple. If a company isn't growing or isn't projected to grow, you might as well put it in the bank or the S&P 500.
The same thing that makes most sense practically all of the time, and that is to consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund.
Or fucking GameStop. I heard they canceled their NFT platform. The profits can only go up. I got my money in Frog Coin.
Frog Coins are a rare alternate currency in Super Mario RPG. You can find them in mini-games, hidden treasures, and when you fight special enemies.
But this is why companies project their sales numbers to be higher and higher every year. Things that might have seemed like hits from our perspective might have been a few million off the mark from what a company expected, or they just blatantly lie about projections for short-term investments just to stay afloat. Have you heard the metric that Facebook is almost out of people to add to their platform? They're just out of humans, apparently.
Yeah, it's like Facebook. I know they bundled it in with a lot of cell phones for developing nations as a way to kind of appeal to a broader global marketplace, and they've kind of hit global, literal global market saturation, which is kind of ridiculous there.
I don't know. Zuck and Fuck might have been lab grown, but Facebook doesn't have the technology to recreate him yet. There is almost no way for Facebook to generate any more users. Everybody that was gonna get a Facebook already has one. They need to create something new to grow even further, use their platform to create and sell new software. But there's a chance that this is as far as they go. I doubt it. They have so much going for them, but the point is, when growth stops, investments do too. Do you remember Zucky Wucky's more flaccid VR chat? How is that gonna compete, dude? It didn't have any of the VR essentials
I feel like even calling it VR chat is a little bit gracious. I always felt like it was a worse take on Second Life. If anybody even knows what that is.
Goku, Super Saiyan Uganda Knuckles, or even Meat Man.
Agumon, 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 Agumon.
I can't find the shit that says this anymore, but I heard it was proposed at an investors meeting at Facebook as a tool for business meetings. That seems reasonable. Businesses use Slack instead of Discord, and hey, maybe businesses will use Metaverse instead of VR chat. It's flawed logic, but I could see somebody throwing the idea out there. That's what I assumed happened. I heard that the team at Facebook were under no illusions that this was some revolutionary feature of the Oculus Quest. Investors saw the VR technology in practice, likely never fiddling with it in their own homes, and their eyes lit up, mesmerized by how I imagined kids were looking at the Nintendo Power Glove 500 years ago when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. They all thought this was the future. They had their hands, their voices were projecting to another person in cyberspace, and they saw the future, and people stood in their homes and were hooked up to machines and socialized in comfort, except it was uncomfortable, actually. Those headsets get kind of sweaty after an hour or hour and a half. They also leave a mark on my big ass forehead. But you can see it, right? You can see that their sights were set. Create a shittier VR chat or die. Video game companies are similarly...
Well, to be fair, this isn't necessarily meant to be 2023, 2024 viable, but is probably going to become a kind of inevitability like further along down the road. I know there's like an episode of Futurama, like one of the very, very early ones, where Fry starts getting advertisements in his dream, and he's like, what the hell is going on with this? And I mean, that's kind of like the ultimate goal, just such an integrated experience between VR and reality that advertisers can get you while you're sleeping. And if you don't like that analogy, you could compare it to something like Sword Art Online, or just kind of any type of scenario where people don't necessarily need to interface with real life as much, and they just kind of get sucked up into a kind of virtual world. As soon as you get the kind of Sword Art Online type equivalent fully created in this world, maybe not like the whole like you can't move in real life while you're using it, but anyway, if you make a VR game good enough, which will happen, it's going to be like a when and not an if, then being already poised to exploit that untapped source of potential is going to be potentially extremely financially lucrative for whatever company can tap that market. And so Facebook doesn't need to be the format that it happens in, as much as it just needs to get a bit of a handle on where that space can go and be ready to adapt for when the big thing does happen. Yeah, it says Kojima already mapped out the entire evolution of the internet and technology back in 2001 with Metal Gear Solid 2. Okay.
In this kinky investor chokehold, it's a big reason why most AAA companies start out having innovative games focused on fun by passionate teams into corporate-generated gray slop. Gray slop. Once a big company creates a successful title, they run it into the dirt, and there's no real reason to change it if people are going to keep buying it. Sports games are the king of this philosophy. You can't really blame the companies either. Free money is just shit in there. If a company takes risks and is consistently losing money for a few years, it could completely destroy them. In a creative industry like video games, if anything can mitigate risk and just farms money, you'd be a fool not to do it. Not every company has infinite wealth out January 25th. Dude, could you...
And I think one big problem with AAA companies is that they essentially get too big to the point where they cannot risk failure because they become out such a huge amount of money that it kind of causes them to play things extremely safe, which gets extremely sanitized and extremely boring over an extended period of time. And so that's kind of where you need like the indie market or like the AA companies to come in and shake things up. Because like FromSoft, I don't even know how you really classify them as a video game company anymore, because like they're not really AAA in the like traditional sense of the word, but they hold such sway over the marketplace right now that they are just as big, if not bigger, in terms of their overall presence on the game market as a traditional AAA company, but they're much smaller and more easily able to maneuver in the marketplace, where all AAA games companies just like don't seem to navigate the market nearly as efficiently. And of course, that isn't to say like AAA game companies don't make like wackier titles, but they don't really have the same amount of support as like the flagship titles, which end up being a bit too safe. So I think like Final Fantasy 16 might be a good example of a game that's like overly sanitized, because like the story is okay, it's decent, it's functional, it's pretty generic like fantasy stuff, but the gameplay was also just kind of generic action combat type stuff. Didn't really do too much revolutionary, and it was just kind of functional for the most part. Wasn't quite revolutionary by any stretch of the imagination. Just kind of like graphical eye candy and the kind of equivalent of a summer blockbuster, but in the form of a video game, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it isn't entirely fulfilling. It's like eating popcorn while you're watching a movie. Like it's nice every once in a while, but it's not fulfilling, you know? It's not like a real dinner or a real meal or anything like that. It's funny that the auto subs put blanks for the swear words. Yeah, I've noticed that on other videos as well. And Yada says they got AAA budgets and profits, but not the same corporate ethos. Well, to be fair, FromSoft has been expanding steadily over the years, and they might be moving more into that like AAA space. But yeah, they're nothing like Ubisoft or yeah, it's always Ubisoft. All right, I felt like I had more to say, but I just kind of lost it.
Imagine if that was an ad. That would have been so smooth. Just look at Blizzard, selling off to Xbox before running it into the ground while alleged cock sniffer Bobby Kotick awards himself with a $400 million severance package after allegedly sniffing cock. I'm sorry, I'll stop. He sailed away from a sinking ship on a raft made of $100 bills. A clean getaway. Part of the problem is that expenses for CEOs and board members.
I don't know if you could really call it the cleanest of getaways when you consider all of the bad crap which happened on his watch. But yeah, it is kind of infuriating, like how many employees got, fired from their jobs for like stock market investor bullcrap, whereas this dude gets off with $400 million when the games really did not live up to the reputations of Blizzard's past.
Numbers have skyrocketed past regular employees in the past few decades once people realize they can get away with paying themselves millions of dollars and doing the minimum amount of work required. This isn't just a video games thing either, it's an every business problem. I'm getting off track again. How does this affect video games? It costs hundreds of millions of dollars to produce a AAA title in today's market. Because of the inflating prices of games production, in an effort to keep up with the rising expectations of sleeker graphics, longer games, complex and fully voiced narratives, and the stupidly high price of marketing, you just can't break even. You need to multiply your money or...
Oh yeah, and just like the marketing stuff, that kills me that like the marketing budget for a game could be just as expensive as the development cost. It's like, why, man? Just like make a good game. Players are going to tell other players if it's a good game and it will take off. And obviously that's a very naive thing to say because hype is hype and it takes a hell of a good game to build that kind of organic hype that could reach those levels. So there's like very few games where that like really happens. So like Vampire Survivors, Among Us, Animal Crossing, that those just like took special events to make happen quite the way they did. But yeah, anyway, it's kind of like not too important because to be fair, in order to buy a game, you first have to know it even exists. And there's definitely been some really cool games that flew under the radar that I'm interested in. Like if I pull up my Steam wish list here, give me a moment to actually open Steam. There's definitely some games that I've known about for a very long time on there, but I've also seen a couple games only recently that I've never heard of that look really interesting. Oh no, don't manage that download. Where is... my wish list? Okay, here we go. So... okay, like Last Epoch is probably a pretty decent example. Like I didn't really know about this game until recently because part of it is because it's like early access and they've been updating it and they haven't really done a bunch of marketing. But because like the fans are getting interested where it's like a good middle ground between the simplicity of Diablo 4 and the complexity of Path of Exile, it just kind of like has carved its own space in the ARPG market recently. But okay, so one game or two games that I've heard about really recently are called Chained Echoes and Crystal Project. Now, I really don't know too much about either of these games, but they look interesting enough that if like they ever come on like a good sale, or if I feel like I have more free time than I actually do to play it, I might check them out. But yeah, especially since like starting my channel, it becomes a lot more difficult for me to like really get invested in some of this other stuff here. So anyway, that's just kind of speaks to marketing and how much it sucks, because it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't things at this point, it feels like. All right, Elden Enthusiast, you have a good night, and thanks for dropping in.
Or the game will be seen as a failure. Some companies place their entire existence on the line to release a new title, and if they don't make their money back, they're finished. Although they were just a subsidiary of Gearbox and then Embracer Group, it finally happened to Volition after they released 2 commercial disappointments. Agents of Mayhem, a decent game that generated no buzz since it released in one of the most stacked years in gaming history, and the Saints Row reboot, a game.
Speaking of stacked years in gaming history, I feel like 2023 was a good year, and I feel like 2024 is going to be stacked. Just the vibe of what I'm getting, of like the little bits of news I've heard of things here and there. How are you guys feeling about like the upcoming year in gaming?
Game that seems to try to check off every bullshit modern writing trope as well as what looks like a blatant reskin of Saints Row 3 and 4 gameplay. On Agents of Mayhem, apparently it was the 16th biggest release in the US and the 4th largest release in the UK in its release month, making it at least 19 million euros. It seems impressive, but for a company with over 200 employees, it's not enough. Even if you paid every employee a gas station wage of $15 an hour, that's at least $31,000 a year, and for just one person. Video games take multiple years to release. Just operating 1 year with around 200 employees, that's at least $6 million. And there's no way that everyone was getting paid that low either. You need senior developers and executives. Multiply that number several times. This likely caused them to release Saints Row in a rushed state. It was made.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a very fair thing to point out, just how much overhead actually goes into developing these games. I know when the first Final Fantasy remake game got released, there was somebody in like one of my Reddit comments that was like, oh, I really just wish they would have released the full game rather than breaking it up into these parts. Bro, look at how much time has passed since the first version of the remake got released versus them just now announcing the Rebirth trailer. Do you really think they could have had all these people on their payroll for this long to only sell one game? It's like the games are just going to be too big for them to realistically cram the OG Final Fantasy VII's content into the graph standards of today, you know? Stella doesn't pay enough attention to the games yet. Astanex says nothing has caught your eye yet. You be lying, Astanex. Ooh, you lying. I know you've been eyeing that Persona 3. You've been playing it. It's already 2024. Ooh, we caught you live in 720p because I can't stream at 4K. Shadow of the Erdtree, exactly. So for me, we've got Shadow of the Erdtree. I am interested in Persona, but not like enough to like buy it right now because you know I'm like focusing on channel stuff a lot. The Final Fantasy VII remake, I think I said that. Anyway, Shadow of the Erdtree, but I'm kind of skeptical that it'll release this year, to be honest. But who knows? Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Oh, nothing upcoming has caught your eye. Oh, okay. That's not what you said a moment ago, but anyway. Yada said it was really only Mario for you. You're not super into Zelda, not super into open world stuff, so Breath of the Wild didn't hit it for you. All right. So, yeah, I feel like there's more to come. I'm extremely excited for Path of Exile 2, whether it be the beta or the full game. It just looks so good, and it is, if they're actually like changing it so that there's a trade system that's not garbage, that's like my biggest wish for the game, as well as the WASD movement. It's probably going to like revolutionize like that portion of gaming, so just really kind of standing by with bated breath. And then of course I'm also really excited for Eiyuden Chronicle, which is supposed to be a spiritual successor of sorts to the Suikoden series. So I hope it doesn't go the route of like 30XX or whatever it was called, the failed like Mega Man spiritual successor. Hopefully it actually meets my hype and expectations. And then of course the Suikoden remasters as well.
In like 3 years, I think. It was going to be impossible to create an open world game that lived up to Volition's old titles with less resources. The marketing tried its hardest to make that game look vicious though. No way that was cheap. Easily tens of millions of dollars. Volition was doomed, and I'm not sure anybody could have steered that ship right. That being said, I can't help but think that changing owners and publishers had something to do with Saints Row's writing being so lame. Like, I know the meme, go woke, go broke. I hate that term, by the way, very reductive. But like, if it's good, people really don't care about diversity. It was just a millennial cringe. In Saints Row 3 and 4, the vibe was just like being raunchy and like over the top. Now it's like,
hey man, if you want a $300 waffle maker, you can buy it with the exposure the idols pay you in. Don't expect us to chip in.
I've told you before, the idols are trying to build a post-capitalist society where money is not a concept.
Yeah?
Hey, Zimos. Shh, don't wake the bitches. You don't waste time.
Well, if you went on a ball gag with a horse tail up your ass for a few years, I think you'd want to unwind too.
What sort of waffle maker can I get for $35?
Presumably one that makes fucking waffles?
Hey! Hey! The wage slave is back!
Like, who is this for? After all, Embracer holds the money to keep them alive. That's just me speculating, though. Volition very well could have just changed directions. I don't know. Good night, Volition. Genuinely, some great games came out of that studio. Time is money. And if all of that time spent by your multi-billion-dollar company only generated 1 more million, then it's clearly not worth pursuing. Agents of Mayhem serves as an example for that. Sunset Overdrive was a phenomenal game, and you're never gonna hear about it again because it just barely broke even. You try convincing somebody that a game that made $500 is worth a sequel. This is why games...
So yeah, that's kind of funny because I was looking at the footage of Sunset Overdrive earlier in the video, and I was like, what game is this? Like, it kind of fell underneath my radar. It actually looked pretty interesting. Looks like the movement was fluid. So I would have been interested to learn more about it. But anyway, it's kind of looks like they failed on their marketing. You know, they didn't spend enough money.
You try convincing somebody that a game that made
You tried it was fun, that multiplayer, but fun.
This is why games that might have come out as otherwise widely revered games has been packed full of microtransactions of all kinds. It's why companies desperately want to create the next big live service game. It's why DLCs are sometimes developed alongside the regular game. It's why a lot of companies cut off risks of losing any money with smaller and more focused games, and why EA shuts down nearly every developer it comes into contact with. It's why cosmetics have become the norm in even fully priced games. Sometimes the fan base of a series is just too strong to die, though. In the case of Call of Duty, you can't get that fast-paced, smooth gunplay with realistic graphics in many other places, and people want to see what the next installment has to offer.
Yeah, but I mean, it just feels... I don't want to say like morally bankrupt, but maybe like artistically bankrupt to include Homelander, and like The Boys and Dune into Call of Duty, as well as like Snoop Dogg and... Was it Nicki Minaj they included? I don't freaking know. Anyway, but if they did something that was like more on brand with Call of Duty, so let's say like you somehow included John Rambo, that could make a lot of sense. Even something a little bit more far-fetched like RoboCop and Terminator could have worked. Maybe not. Well, yeah, actually RoboCop could kind of work. But like the Terminator, that would have been a pretty cool fit. But like this, it's just not what I think of when I think of Call of Duty. I mean, now it kind of is just because it's so freaking outlandish and nonsensical to me. But yeah, ask me what I thought of Call of Duty back in like 2010. I would not have thought of like The Boys, but of course, like The Boys weren't really a thing then. Anyway, you get my point. Fun fact, Yada has a credit on a COD game. Oh, as in like a development credit? I'm interested to hear more. SNX said, Sunset Overdrive needed more people. The game unto itself was good. Very fast, responsive controls, okay humor. So yeah, that might have been an issue with them making a multiplayer game instead of like a single player game. I don't know. Like it looked like the movement was good at the very least. So yeah, I don't know. Like part of me laments that it seems we're moving more towards more and more live action games, but I recognize I'm kind of also part of the problem because in some ways it is a lot more fun to have live service multiplayer games where you can like stack yourself up against other individuals. But another downside of that for me personally is I've discovered even if I play like a live service game, I really don't actually get a lot of like satisfaction out of it when I compare it to single game experiences. So like Lies of P, it's got like its beginning, its middle, and its end, and I get the satisfaction of having gone through that entire journey, whereas there is no conclusion and no resolution to playing like a live action, or not live action, live service style game. So I try to limit how many live service games that I play, just because I do recognize that I don't get as much satisfaction from it. Main story is the meat and potatoes. They even released a version without multiplayer on PC. Okay, maybe I'll look into that someday. That's a lie. I'm probably not going to, but I mean, I might look into a trailer, but yeah.
Offer. It has an unmistakable demographic and appeal. Adding silly costumes and skins were a no-brainer and have gathered more outside attention for its increasing ridiculousness, at the risk of alienating longtime fans of the gritty and serious tone that the games have been known for. Sports Games has developed brand recognition to the point that the name FIFA was kind of held hostage by FIFA. EA renamed their game, and guess what? Everybody still bought it because it's the exact same game that customers buy every year with slightly different character models. Nobody can mistake it. Everybody knows that they're buying the same game over and over again. They still do it. The brand loyalty is crazy. The games have also developed their own culture that covets collectibles. EA has the perfect fan base from a company perspective, always willing to buy the minimum amount of work with the most amount of microtransactions shoved into their faces as possible. Why would you
It hurts, but he's not wrong, is he?
Change if you're EA? That's free money. If someone's willing to give that to you, you're gonna take it. John Riccitello, former EA CEO, famously said, "If you're 6 hours into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not price sensitive in that moment." That man is a demon. God damn! You serve him at a restaurant, he expects a tip. He only goes to movies if the date pays for it. Man has millions in the bank. But you can catch him at the Walmart self-checkout doing his thing. He is a hustle demon, dude. Someone needs to stop him.
I'm not loyal to anybody. I'm a demon. I have no sympathy. I'm nice with it.
Now that quote might have been an exaggeration used to explain the concept of engaging a customer before charging more, to demonstrate a business model, but given that this is the same CEO that then went to Unity and burnt all goodwill overnight, it makes you question whether or not that's true, don't it?
I don't know who I am anymore. I'm getting too much money.
If it's possible, you will be nickel and dimed for everything you're worth.
He really screwed the pooch with that Unity maneuver, and it's probably done everlasting damage to that brand's reputation, so much so that it probably woke up a lot of developers as to the risks of going with that method of development, and probably encouraging more people to do more proprietary work. But that's kind of beyond me to talk about, honestly. That Unity news hurt your soul. It was kind of baffling to me. At first I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. I guess it's their company. They can do what they want with it. And then as I learned more that it wasn't really a one-time thing moving forward, and that it was going to be a recurring thing, I was like, oh my God, this is awful. It's every time I learned anything more about Unity, I was just in more and more shock and awe, which is kind of rare. Anyway, going back to the video.
As long as people like him are around, and there always will be. Now, from a customer's perspective, it's a really simple task to direct a company. Focus on quality. If the quality is good, then a customer will buy. You build a reputation and develop brand loyalty that way. A few bad releases can put a brand's reputation in jeopardy, with their consumer base being mostly online. There is easy access to reviews from a wide variety of people. Putting quality first makes even more sense in the video game scene. Some gaming companies really do focus on this though. FromSoft generally hands over the reins to games to one of the most dick road directors in gaming, Miyazaki. This, no matter how well intentioned, is still a business decision. Maybe it's because they value the quality first model and seek to build up goodwill with their customers, and they believe in strong fundamentals, believing that this is the best way to achieve that. Maybe even a passion for good games to boot. Less charitably, maybe it's because they're not confident in their ability to create other types of games under different developers.
So, yeah, he forgot about Armored Core while writing this, and that was directed by Masaru Yamamura. And I don't entirely really know how the internals of FromSoft works, and how that proprietary relationship fits into Kadokawa, essentially, but it might help that Miyazaki is the president of FromSoft and can dictate that the direction of the company is to try to make titles that they themselves would want to play. And this is just a philosophy that seems to be a tried and true proven method of building quality products to an extent. And the example that I'll always turn to is the complete fumbling of Final Fantasy 15 as it, well, even like the third, well, essentially Final Fantasy 13 through Final Fantasy 15. Maybe I could extend that earlier to like 12 or even 11. Anyway, the point is, Final Fantasy focused on so many of the wrong things with Final Fantasy 15 that Atlus with Persona 5 was able to create a game which danced circles around Final Fantasy 15, which has faded into obscurity. Nobody really cares about Final Fantasy 15, but if you go on like Reddit or Tumblr or probably like 4chan, even today, you're very likely to run into some kind of fan art or discussion pertaining to Persona or something unrelated to the topic at hand could just bring up Persona or something like that, because the developers at Atlus focused on creating a game that was true to what they knew and would appeal to their Japanese fan base. And the reason why that translates so well is because by appealing to one specific fan base, it's the shared human experience which allows it to kind of transcend borders and be appealing to people from overseas, versus not really understanding what exactly a international imaginary fan base wants and trying to cater to that. Like it's catering to an ideal which doesn't exist versus an actual fan base which does exist, which gives them a lot more clarity in their mission to create the type of game that they want to make. So yeah, I just kind of always turn to those games as my like go-to example for that. Costello said, at least when Wizards of the Coast tried to pull their bullcrap, the backlash actually made them walk it back. Wizards of the Coast still sucks, though. That's kind of an unfair statement, not because I think you're wrong, but because I feel like Wizards of the Coast is a hydra. Like, it's unfair, I think, in some ways to talk about what I'm assuming you're referring to is like the whole Dungeons and Dragons fiasco. Whereas, if you want to talk about that, I feel like it ignores the other head of the hydra, which was Magic the Gathering and all the crap that they pulled with like the reserve list, like the Black Lotuses and a whole bunch of questionable goodwill destroying decisions. So yeah, the D&D, yeah, I that's kind of what I figured. Astinek says 15 was a disappointment. It was so generic. It was like every fantasy trope in Brocom mixed and diluted to nothing. That's a good point. Sunset Overdrive is $5 on Steam right now. That's cool. I mean, my issue with like Sunset Overdrive or just like other like buying new games is I have plenty of games where I haven't played that I kind of want to go through and I'm probably still not going to do. It's just like more of a time thing than the money thing. Although I'm a cheapskate and the money does play into it. So anyway, thanks for giving me the update on that though.
They don't want to rock the boat. Similarly, for a long time, Konami was seen as a quality maker of games, slowly growing to becoming one of the top dogs in the gaming space. I think a lot of people would say that they truly became AAA with the release of Metal Gear Solid 5. Although not the greatest in the series to some fans, it was definitely the most widely appealing. Beautiful graphics, massive open world, mechanics that are super fun to play with, music from well-known artists, and a director with a clear style that gave his games a real sense of cohesion. And you could also do this with a horse. People wanted to play games because this guy was attached to him. It's why Kojima was brought onto Konami's board of directors. Reading off a wiki article here about MGS5, on its release date, the game grossed $179 million, higher than the combined opening day box office of the films Avengers Age of Ultron and Jurassic World. I would argue that this game introduced the series to people who had previously...
To be fair, I do feel like Age of Ultron and that Jurassic World movie were very mid, but nonetheless still very impressive, especially for a video game. Poor
been
horse.
hesitant because of the open world nature, stunning graphics, the fact that you could do this with a horse. And 179 million? God damn! Surely this would mean a new era of Konami games that consistently topple the market, headed by Kojima. They fired him. They fired him, dude! In an act of defiance against a limiting culture Konami was developing, Kojima had the PT demo released to the public, flooring people with one of the greatest horror experiences yet created.
Yeah, I know people were super hyped about the PT demo, and like I've said many times on stream before, like horror games don't really interest me, so that just kind of passed me by. But even I was hearing a lot of the positivity and the buzz surrounding this, and so it's just such a disappointment that this got flushed down the toilet, like Acme versus Wile E. Coyote.
Konami were likely sick of the rising costs and liberties that Kojima took and just let him go. His firing just goes to show you, though. Him and his team craft one of the greatest games that year, beloved by millions, generates a monumental amount of buzz on a stealth release of a new passion project, and they fire him. And to Konami's credit, they were kind of right, depending on who you are. If you were passionate about games, bad decision. If you were passionate about money, like an investor, you were very happy. They didn't need to spend all of that money to generate profits. People would have bought Metal Gear games without all of the emphasis on graphics and variability in gameplay. They likely didn't want to hurt their bottom line for investor reports either. And while all this was happening, Konami has been popping off with pachinko machines. Their mobile game section has been making them buku bucks. I don't know exactly what they made, but it seems safe to assume that it was enough to feel comfortable with removing their old bread and butter, Kojima, from the board of directors and firing him from the company, to then release a blatant cash grab by wanting their devs to use the expensive engine developed for MGS5.
So, what was I going to say about that? Yeah, like this is like one of those cases where it's like, well, you can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. Why continue to fire Kojima? And we will never really know the answer to that other than alleged office politics and whatnot. But like Konami switching away from like the focus on games into like more pachinko crap or mobile crap is disappointing for me personally. But I mean, if they're making money, like as everybody always says, vote for wallets. It looks like our votes are kind of being drowned out by other ones.
As soon as they see an opportunity, it's dollar signs in their eyes. It's go time. And why not? Konami isn't a person. It's a group of people doing their jobs to appease shareholders and ensure the company's future. Giant companies exist for the sake of their own continued existence. The only way for this to not be the case is if the decision makers truly care about the product they create, which is a tough ask. Not everyone in business can be a game developer or even a gamer. Nowadays, more and more indie companies are gaining supporters through the use of online spaces, but these mega giants started as companies decades ago, potentially far removed from their original visions and intentions of their decision makers. Square Enix has a history of unrealistic sales expectations for things like Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Sleeping Dogs. All of these games generated several millions in revenue, were reviewed quite favorably, and were fairly high quality in their own way, but these properties barely got touched. Square continues to launch middling games, overreaching, trying to appeal to wider audiences and make more money.
God, it is so frustrating to me seeing like the absolute state of garbage, subpar quality games like freaking Stranger of Paradise. Anyway, what was this game called? Like, this one didn't bother me. Like, sure, people had issues with it, but it was trying to do something different. I can respect the artistry behind it, even if it isn't necessarily like everybody's cup of tea. But yeah, I don't know. Like, this one was okay. Like, they actually took a risk with this game, which I respect a hell of a lot more than like the garbage that is like Final Fantasy Dissidia and even Crisis Core. I think is pretty garbage. But anyway.
Money. Forspoken abandoned everything that Squeenix was good at and attempted to copy the Marvel movie formula of all things, in an era where people have been feeling massive fatigue over cute and quirky dialogue. The gameplay was also fairly bland. From what I can see anyway, I might play it someday. Babylon's Fall was only published by Squeenix, but it wasn't even that bad. Nobody was out here championing the game though. It had an exhausting amount of microtransactions that just soured it.
I was about to say, I've never heard of this game, and then he says it has microtransactions. I'm like, miss me with that.
Marvel's Avengers didn't even have the benefit of Babylon's great combat. It just lacked good level and enemy design with little to no challenge and a bland, tired story. Square just made it a habit to release kinda lame games, and get this, they also decided to sell Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Thief, and several other IPs for just $300 million. Bro, what? 90% of gamblers quit before they win big, and Square took that to heart and put their money on fucking nothing. They're just throwing shit at the wall at this point. Do you know what they bought? Fucking NFTs, dude. Fucking blockchain technology. Have you played those games? I mean, I haven't played Thief, but I know all these series are beloved, well received, and have an amazing legacy, and are ripe with potential for video games, movies, merchandise. Intellectual property is called that because it kind of functions like property. By that
So, I mean, this isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, and in many cases, that's probably like a smart executive business decision, because while that IP might not be exclusively within their hands, they might have other financial or developmental concerns where they can't actively manage those IPs. So it could be good for them to hand them off temporarily and make money that way and come back to them when they do have more development funds available to work with those IPs. So I don't see that to be entirely negative.
I mean, it's an asset. It's something that can make you money even if you don't make anything. $300 million, dude. That's
okay, yeah, he's bringing that up.
That tells me they wanted as much money as possible to place into NFTs quickly, to the point where they lowered the price on these incredible assets that someone would buy them immediately. Some guy convinced some old-ass Japanese man that this was the future and that they are early. That dude is probably chopped up in pieces under a bridge right now. The only thing keeping Square in the green while their next big title is being made at this point is the consistent revenue from Yoshi P and his dedicated team working on Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO. That and their mobile games. It's really...
Yeah, I was about to say, I feel like that's overlooking the mobile games, like the stupid Final Fantasy Brave Exvius or the Final Fantasy Record Keeper, and what the hell the difference is between those two, I have no idea. They do have a very saturated, like, mobile games company, or whatever you want to call it, division. Is that the truth?
Really easy to point and laugh at out-of-touch executives. Like, that was stupid. That's really stupid. But do you know what happened after Square Enix's most recent game released? You know, Final Fantasy XVI selling 3 million units in the first weeks. They have lost over $2 billion in value since that came out. Money isn't real, dude! Just make more of it. I don't see the problem. It's heartbreaking. Even when your company puts out a banger, a commercial success, it's still not enough to survive as a giant corporation.
I mean, sure, it's a banger to an extent, but it's really not. Like, it's an acceptable game. I'm sure it's going to be beloved by a lot of people as like one of the first Final Fantasies that they may have played, but it's really not that revolutionary. And I feel like once a game like Dragon's Dogma 2 gets released, or I mean, even when you compare it to like Baldur's Gate 3, like Final Fantasy 16 got absolutely swept last year, and historically speaking, they were like some of the heaviest contenders for like games of the year or just like all this other stuff, and they barely had a presence on the award stage, which, I mean, like the award stage stuff is kind of like bullcrap anyway, but I'm sure you guys get what I'm getting at.
Without growth, there's no reason for an outside investor to put money in. You might as well invest in the S&P 500. The reality is, as a publicly traded company, if you're not growing, you're dying. To survive, you need to be ruthless in bleeding your audience dry, just barely teetering on the edge of what gamers are willing to put up with, or dedicated to a mission of quality that people revere despite the tremendous risk. PlayStation has an insanely high bar of quality. They've crafted an image of themselves as the premium game console with the greatest and most expensive first-party titles. They also need to make these game releases into events that any gamer would want in order to sell their consoles, mostly to get people to buy into the PlayStation family and purchase their software there. Consoles are pretty expensive to make, and they don't make a lot on it. It's all to get you to buy digital on PlayStation. Nintendo was pretty damn close to going under when Wii U sales were abysmal. Their value hovered to around $3 a share. I had faith that Nintendo would come back. I really believed in the quality of their first-party games.
So there's like a lot of other weird stuff with the Wii U. The fact that it was called Wii U was probably a huge marketing misstep, because that just kind of makes it sound like a peripheral to the Wii, which was already a pre-existing console. And so, yeah, not only that, like it didn't seem like their lineup of games was particularly strong during that period of time. And just like the oddity between the main console kind of not being the console, but like having the monitor in one control was a little bit awkward with like how bulky it was. And so they really refined a lot of what went wrong with the Wii U with the advent of the Nintendo Switch. Up until the Nintendo Switch came out, I was of the opinion that I thought like the PlayStation Vita was like the best console to ever release. That or like the PSP, but I think the Vita had better stuff going on for it with like the back touch panels and whatnot. But anyway, now that the Switch is out, I do think as far as like a handheld, maybe like the handheld part's irrelevant. As far as like an actual game console goes, it's probably like the best console to ever exist, just because of so many small quality of life features, which really elevates it above the competition. I love the stupid little kickstand that you can use to like prop your Switch up on a table and like look at it. Having the detachable Joy-Cons to go along with that, so you can like keep it on the table, but like play from the comfort of like rocking back in a chair or whatnot on a flight. It's a amazing device, and yeah, it's just a fantastic piece of hardware, whereas like all the other consoles are just consoles tethered to the TV. You've got the Switch dock, whereas like the Wii U did not have like any of that going on for it. So it's not too much of a surprise that it didn't do super well, with like all of these small things adding up to not be the best of experiences. So I'm really glad that the Switch has done so well, and it also helps them that they intentionally use technology that is like, 5 years old by the time it comes out, so that way they really keep their overhead costs down and really work with the power of the software to generate sales and the strength of their artistic vision for working with antiquated hardware. Just absolutely a brilliant business model, which is why Nintendo literally has over $1 billion in the bank. Nintendo's so weird. The Wii U is a failure of a console, but you love the games on it much more than the ones on the Switch. Which one's for you specifically? Because I'm curious, because I didn't have a lot of games for the Wii U because I essentially bought it to play Smash, which I don't really regret. So I pretty much have like Smash 4, Mario Maker, and I honestly can't remember. I'd need to like look at my shelf. But anyway, it's on the other side of the room. SNX thinks all main series Nintendo's consoles should follow that route in terms of like going with the handheld route, because it sounds like the Switch 2 is kind of going to be doing the same thing. But of course, those are all kinds of rumors that Nintendo is denying. But if you look at like the types of purchases Nintendo is making in like the hardware sector, it's pretty analogous as to what you would expect of a Switch 2. Chadwick said, Nintendo did everything almost right. The Switch, 75% of a truly great piece of hardware. Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. I've never really been fully satisfied with the console until I kind of jailbroke the PlayStation Vita and was able to like customize it a bit more. And that's kind of like my biggest gripe with all of these consoles, is that I feel like quite often they're really held back by this marginally functional UI that doesn't really serve the consumers very well at all. Like maybe if you only watch Netflix on your PlayStation, that you kind of want to auto load into Netflix when you first open it up, or have like specific folders for your freaking games. Or just like the customizability of choice is just such a downer that they don't have it in Anyway, so like I think like the PS3 you could add like theme music to your console and like use like playlists and whatnot, but you couldn't do that with PS4. I don't think you can do that with PS5 either. And it's like, why is the PS3 of all things like kind of easier to work with in some ways than the PS5? It's just baffling. PSP was truly a miracle machine, by the way. I mean, I loved it. Mr. Yada loved Mario Maker, Mortal Kombat 8, Smash, Splatoon, Pikmin. You got to go back through the library and find the rest. Well, the thing is, like, the Switch has a Mario Maker. It has a better Smash. I don't know if it has Mortal Kombat, but it should. It has Splatoon and it has Pikmin, so I'm kind of curious why you like the Wii U better. You were saying that the PSP was one of the greatest pieces of gaming hardware, period, at that time? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, Mario Kart, not Mortal Kombat. That's fair. I mean, it certainly still has Mario Kart, like arguably like one of the better ones. Yeah. SNX bought the Wii U expecting the release of Dragon Quest X in the US. Sadly, it did not happen. Yeah, Dragon Quest X looks pretty damn good, and it is crying shame that it hasn't been released here. All right, going back to the video.
I just think they made a questionable naming scheme and a hard-to-market product. I didn't expect to sit where they are now. I mean, their value has multiplied since the Wii U days, thanks to the consistent hard work and pay cuts self-imposed for Iwata, currently sitting at about $13 a share, similar to, like, the Wii days. And when I say that, that should hit you. Almost anyone in any first world country had a Nintendo Wii. Iwata truly believed in the company and the employees. The Switch did better than anyone could imagine and brought the value way back up. If the Switch flopped, Nintendo was probably done. I mean, they probably would have switched to just software or exclusive.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain how much of a sea change the Wii was when it came out onto the market, because it just hit an audience that it had never been able to reach before, but like the casual Andes and the casual Andes moms and dads. So I remember being in high school and whatnot, and my friend's family actually buying their first console and it being a Wii because of things like the silly like Wii Sports package that came with the console, it being such a game changer and like really bringing like the family together in a lot of ways, which is never something that I would have expected, because like the parents were like really strict and whatnot, and did not really believe in consoles for like children at that point. But I mean, it might have helped that at that age, like they were like older and whatnot. And anyway, it was sold out for months and people were like trying to hunt those things down. I mean, that's kind of been the case for like the Switch and the PS5, I guess, but it was a different vibe. They were sold out not because of scalpers, but because like everybody and their mother's brother were like looking for their family, you know?
Exclusively handhelds at the very least. The fact that they were this close to failing as a business though seems unthinkable today. Not every company can be so dedicated, have such wonderful staff, and be so lucky with things like Pokemon Go. That was a phenomenon. Even then, both PlayStation and Nintendo had the advantage of creating popular game platforms, being able to heavily market their own games on their own consoles. Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, on the other hand, is so caught up in pioneering the newest form of video game rentals and trying to create the Netflix of gaming that he doesn't understand that yes, people will buy your console if you have good games. When I talk to others about whether or not they'll get an Xbox or a PlayStation, it's always PlayStation. Why? The exclusives. Fucking duh, video games. They're the same box. There are a few weirdos out there with brand loyalty, but I think the most people don't care at this point. People buy...
Yeah, I think not only is it the exclusives that matter, it's kind of also the environment in which they're brought out. And there's been a lot of fumbles over the years with Xbox where PlayStation was just absolutely able to dunk and clown on Xbox. Like, I don't know how many of you guys remember the console wars when Microsoft was like, oh, like all of our games are going to have DRM, so you can't share them with like your friends, like you can't just give them the physical disc. And then like the next day, like Shuhei Yoshida goes up on stage with like some other guy and they're like, this is how you share games with your friends on PlayStation. And he just literally hands the dude like the case for a game with the disc in it. It's like, that's it. Now you've shared your game with your friend. And oh my God, that was the nail in the coffin right there for Xbox One. I don't remember which Xbox series it was. Anyway, yeah. Remember when game companies used to take shots at each other? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mr. Yada said, I'm right that this Switch has a lot of games on it, but you don't find any of the new entries to be better than the previous ones. That's fair. I was just curious as to why you preferred the Wii U, because like as a console, it felt a lot clunkier to me than the Switch specifically, whereas like the Switch has a lot more advantages to me. So I was curious as to why you felt more nostalgia for the Wii U. Shadwick says that's classic Nintendo, under manufacture by about 12%. It hurts them out the door, but always gets them a bonus on the next shipment. Okay. Understandable, Mr. Yada. Okay, going back in.
Buy PlayStation because they want to play God of War, Last of Us, Spider-Man, not because it's the coolest box. I never ended up buying a PlayStation because I couldn't afford one, but fuck if I don't want to play Ragnarok. Sometimes I think about getting a PlayStation just because of that. I know that's not an abnormal thing to think either. He didn't seem convinced that investing in quality outweighs the immense cost. And it's not an invalid thing to think either. You can't turn public opinion on a dime. It would take years and another generation of consoles for people to give Xbox a chance.
Well, there's also like another side of this story, whereas Microsoft makes a certain amount of money on Xbox as a console, they are also shifting positions to focus more on PC gaming and freeing up that market, which is, you know, arguably like a larger market overall, especially when you look at the longevity of a console versus like the longevity of the idea of PC, that in the long term, they're going to make way more money by opening up the borders of exclusivity between Xbox and PC. And if they do that, there's no real incentive to make the Xbox exclusive anymore because they're making their money on PC. And then if Xbox isn't exclusive, it's kind of losing to PlayStation. But even now, like, Microsoft is kind of getting the last laugh because of so many games being ported to PC that were previously PlayStation exclusives, because devs still want that PC market-based money. So it's an understandable like business decision, and I'm sure like Microsoft managing their money knows what the hell they're doing a hell of a lot better than I do. So yeah.
Some countries, especially Japan, Xbox is a joke. Microsoft's Xbox division is just unwilling to bleed money for the sake of a larger payoff in the future. And it makes sense. I can see Microsoft not being pleased with that small portion of their company is costing them money with no immediate return to show for investors. That could cause people...
So maybe I didn't say it as well as I wanted to, so just to like beat that dead horse again, if Xbox is not having exclusives that like tear it away from the PC market, then there's no point in them really trying to compete head to head with the exclusives of like Sony and whatnot, because that kind of extra pool of the PC gamer marketplace also really dips into like the Sony side, and there's just like no real upside to having pure Xbox exclusivity, and they have moved away from that model because they want all Xbox games to be available on PC as well. Scaleezy said, technology is advanced enough at this point that there aren't any big jumps to be made anymore. Consoles are as powerful as PCs now, so AI all that's left is game selection and culture. That's not entirely true, and we are kind of already limited by the hardware architecture that's on consoles because of just the constraints on technology right now. And I'm sure once the hardware meets... Okay, so let's talk about it this way. Right now, one of the target goals of consoles is to be able to deliver images in 4K quality. That's actually not really feasible based on the current architecture of the consoles. Like, obviously they can output some things to 30 FPS, but 4K 60 FPS and above, it's just not very realistic without a lot of dev input to circumvent a lot of the weaknesses of the consoles and or other like software upgrades like Unreal Engine 5 to deal with things like Lumen, ray tracing, all this other stuff. But of course, like I feel like what Scalzi is trying to get at is like, even if you add the stupid stuff like Lumen, ray tracing, nanite technology, all this other like buzzword type gimmicky stuff, it's not really going to fundamentally change a lot of the visual experience of the games, which I can potentially agree with. And I think, well, the premise of what he said is sort of wrong there. I think one often underappreciated aspect of this kind of paradigm here is that all of this stuff adds in a huge bloat of dev time, and it's not very clear whether the juice is worth the squeeze. And I would argue that for most cases, the juice is not worth the squeeze. And I'm going to again turn to Persona 5, just running circles around Final Fantasy 15, because Persona 5 was carried by the weight of its art direction. And I think as a broader truth, we could always turn to like the Nintendo's consoles and like their first party games, where they're able to kind of mitigate their shortcomings through very strong art styles, which keep production costs lowered. So anyway, over time, technology will get better. There will be a lot more technological advancement, but they might not be as drastic as the jump from like the regular Nintendo to the Super Nintendo to the PlayStation to the N64 to the Dreamcast, and all of that. And so Chadwick says better performance and cheaper PC gaming has never been a thing. Not in your memory. So right now, I mean, depending on like how you look at things, for many people who don't have like a lot of disposable income, a console is the best introductory marketplace to get into gaming to an extent, because it's powerful enough to run like the current gen of like software, but it's not going to cost you like $1,000, $1,500, or $2,000 to do it. Whereas like that's kind of like the beginning point to get into like PC gaming, is to typically have a system which is at the bare minimum like $1,000, and that's not even necessarily including things like monitors. Although you could say the same thing about like consoles, they don't necessarily include monitors either. But yeah. And then Stella says, a good gaming PC will outlive a console. And yes, there is the fact that PCs are typically easier to upgrade. Laptops, of course, are more of a pain in the ass to do, but more and more lately, even laptops are becoming somewhat more customizable. Get wrecked, Scallies. Yeah. Chadwick said, in this generation only perhaps, but your PS4 has been good from day 1 to year 7 for a competitive cost. And that's true too. Like, consoles now are meant to last a lot longer than they were back versus the days of the regular Nintendo to the Super Nintendo. So that might be a good point to bring up in contrast as well.
To lose their jobs, or lead to Microsoft hurrying the release of a game, making something shittier. I mean, Redfall was absolute bullshit. Everyone was embarrassed to be a part of it. Arcane, I mean, they had a history of making fantastic video games. Xbox came out with a public statement that it's not up to quality. That is crazy. Bethesda didn't even do that for Starfield. Seemed like a cool idea too. I just wish they spent half of the marketing budget and put it back in development. I'm sure they had to rush it out for an investor report or some shit. I don't know. Making a
The funny thing is, like, Redfall consistently had a lot of red flags going on, and I don't know if you guys have like noticed this with games, but I just cannot. I feel like the life of me, I cannot trust a lot of trailers for games when all they ever show is like cutscenes or pre-rendered footage, and they never show any gameplay. To me, that's an immediate red flag, and really makes me disinterested in the game, and it feels like the devs are trying to pull a fast one on me by building up hype that isn't really there. Whereas like for me, like looking at everything, all of the videos that Grinding Gear Games have released with Path of Exile 2, it's pretty much just pure gameplay and them talking about the gameplay and the systems they plan to integrate into the game. It's like they just let the game speak for itself, and that is way, 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 way more powerful than cutscenes for most things. But to be fair, like there are kind of some exceptions when you're doing like more narratively driven games or like stuff that's supposed to be like graphically spectacular, like spectacular in the sense of spectacle in a more literal sense. So stuff like Final Fantasy 16, I was really iffy on because most of it was just that kind of like pre-rendered gameplay. And honestly, I really did not like a lot of Final Fantasy 16 when I was watching the trailers because it just looked like a particle-filled mess. And that might have just been because like the trailers weren't initially released at 4K resolution, and trying to watch them at like 1080p just did it no favors. But I still kind of stand by it that the game is extremely visually cluttered, but it's nothing like freaking Immortals of Avium. Like, at least they showed off gameplay for that game, but oh my god. A game where I just have like literally half my screen covered up by stupid arm gun things and just UI elements, only for those to get covered up by even like further UI elements is like, Anyway, I'm just going off on a tangent there. Hey, without horns, welcome back to stream. Mr. Yada says, cinematic trailers with no gameplay are an instant no for you as well. Understandable. Asnex said, the only companies you really trust are Atlas and FromSoft. You don't trust Nintendo either? You've been burned by Pokemon, I see. Hi, cat. Oh. Okay.
Quality game up to the highest modern standards is risky, expensive, and scary, even for industry giants. Just know that when a AAA game developer pushes microtransactions in your face, when they cancel your most anticipated game, when your favorite IPs are getting ping-ponged around the business world with no word of a game in sight, remember that there is a ton of money bullshit that they're tied to, and they can never escape it. EA is huge because they did what they had to.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, then they shouldn't be as big as they are if they are facing like these many struggles. I think it's a smarter play to make smaller games, but better games, like better like actual gameplay than regurgitated like graphical fidelity, circle jerk type bullshit. And I feel like this is kind of being proven time and time again when like the indie games that are released in a year are often the most interesting or like most enjoyed by the fandom. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare like Baldur's Gate to an indie game, but I mean, it had indie game spirit and it just was like the champion of the people. Vampire Survivors isn't like always like the most fair choice either, but anyway, where was I going with that? In games, bullcrap relating to the size of the games. Yeah, okay. So not only are new games competing with other new games on the market, I think something that isn't appreciated enough is that any new game that is released today, in my mind, is also competing with my attention to go back and play like one of my favorite games of like Super Mario Brothers 3, which came out in 1988. You know, like not only does it have to compete with that in terms of like my time, it also has to compete with that in terms of my money. And it's really unfair to expect such a ridiculously high level of quality of every single game to release right now to compete with Super Mario Brothers 3. But honestly, that's kind of like my vanilla ice cream, like the standard by which I compare like all other games. Like it's like Super Mario Brothers 3, extremely simple game, just absolutely entertaining, not like crazy difficult, but it's just got extremely tight controls. It's got strong thematic presence, really great art for what it is, and just a lot of variety, and it's just massively entertaining to me. And I do kind of hold all other games to that kind of standard, if not like a 1-to-1 type thing, but just like in terms of like the enjoyment that I want to get out of a game has to, at some level, compete with every other game that I've ever played, which is unfair, but that's just kind of how it is. And so that's part of why I feel like a lot of gamers are getting so jaded. It's because these games that are releasing today aren't necessarily better than the ones that released 30 years ago. Mario 3 is a good yardstick if tough. I mean, am I wrong though? Mr. Yada says, is it even possible for a bloated public company to downsize? Has that ever happened willingly? So the answer is yes. And the way that you would do that is by having multiple departments working on multiple projects, which, you know, kind of brings its own host of issues, because then you have to adequately balance the amount of managers and the workers for each project. But it is feasible to do. And quite often, like, one of the smartest things you can do is empower your audience to work for you or work with you. So I'm trying to think of like really popular examples of like where things like this have gone right. So I know like some people who worked for Path of Exile were originally like fans of the game. I know there were like a couple Blizzard devs that like originally started out by like making mods to support the game, but Blizzard I think has really dropped the ball on a lot of stuff by like not more aggressively hiring like people that mod their games to keep propelling themselves forward. So for example, like the Deadly Boss Mods guy, like, bruh, just freaking hire him and allow him to help guide the raid teams into making like attacks more telegraphed, and it would have solved like a lot of problems in the WoW raiding community. But you know, that's just kind of going off of, you know, maybe some unrealistic expectations about what they could actually truly implement into a game with such an ancient engine. But then again, like, why hasn't there been an update to World of Warcraft to either update the engine to that point or an actual sequel? I mean, and of course, like, this is kind of me talking out of my ass here, like, but money, like, it's just kind of, it feels like in many ways like WoW is a little bit on life support, and they're just trying to inject a little bit of different drugs into the system with things like Season of Discovery. Chadwick said, no, I'm not wrong. A ruler needs to be extremely solid and predictable. Mario 3 is rock solid and a good standard definition of a video game. You agree totally. Asenek said, you don't know, you'd put it at a solid 8 or a 9 out of 10. Mario 1 is a fairer bare minimum. It was a great game, but bare bones. I don't feel like Mario 1 is a fair bare minimum, because Mario 1 does have like a lot of, rather, it does not have like a lot of quality of life features, and is really rough in a lot of ways, and isn't really as dynamic as Mario 3 is to me, which isn't necessarily like a bad thing. I mean, it also came out like way earlier, and it does like, it deserves a pass. It's a very fun game on its own regardless, but it isn't as entertaining to me as Mario 3. Like, Mario 1 in many ways to me is kind of like the quintessential 5 out of a 10 scale, the way that I rate games, where like, it's a fun game, it is very entertaining, but it doesn't quite do it for me. Like, it's just kind of like a game to pass the time, but it doesn't like make me wonder more about Mario World at this point, partially because, you know, I've played Mario 3 and like the other the sequels, but it does like have a lot of, I don't want to say issues, it just doesn't have like a lot of features to really smooth out the experience, whereas I felt like Mario 3 really brought gaming to the next level. Oh my god, if you actually like look back in history at the time Mario 3 came out and look at just how revolutionary it was, it was absolutely ridiculous what they did with what they had. But that's just kind of like moving beyond the point there. So like, it is quite unfair, I think, to use Mario 3 as the yardstick or stick or whatnot by which I measure like all other games. But I mean, it's kind of just like my vibe check, you know? It's much better yardstick than Desert Bus. Oh no. Mr. Yada says Mario 1 and 3 are great, but World will be your favorite will be your forever favorite. And yeah, I think Super Mario World to me is like just as good quality as Super Mario Brothers 3, but there's something about Super Mario Brothers 3 which appeals to me more than Super Mario World. And I think part of that is like the character design and the level design. It was just more appealing to me. Like, I absolutely love the idea of like the Sky Zone, the Giant Zone, the Tanuki tail turning into an actual Tanuki, the frog suit. The different worlds are like a novel thing at that point in the game, although it's like obviously a lot more robust with Super Mario World, and that does have an advantage over it. It felt like the cape was way too cheap for me, and I don't know. Astanek says, a bare minimum is something that is what you would say all games should have. There are a lot of worse games, sadly, and the fact that means to you that they shouldn't have been made. Right, so let me try to like rephrase this. I think Mario 1, I'll stand by and say like that is my like definition 5 like bare minimum game. I think we kind of agree on that point. But to be fair, why would I necessarily want to compare, or sorry, why should I be motivated to compare the games that come out today to like the bare minimum of a game back in like 1985, you know? So to me, it makes more sense to compare games to what I consider like good games are. So while in a sense, I do implicitly compare them to like Mario 1, I always want a Mario 3 for every game that comes out. And if I don't get a Mario 3, there is going to be like a little bit of disappointment because like, oh man, you could have gotten there maybe, hopefully, but you didn't. And then if something is ever better than Mario 3, it's like, oh my God, this game is fantastic. I can't stop talking about the game. So that's just kind of like where my mindset is coming from.
They exploit the player as much as possible. Lowering variability with their yearly release model is a smart decision in an industry that's as creative and ever-changing as gaming. Video games are a very special medium. Unlike a movie, you can spend several hours on one and not see or understand everything it has to offer. It creates a sincere, emotional attachment to some players thanks to the amount of time you spend on it or with others while you play. This might seem like an incredible...
All right, Without Horns is trying to slander me and bait me. So he said, I'm saying that Dark Souls 2 is better than Mario 3, eh? You should back up my review score for Dark Souls 2. I'd say it's even worse than Mario 1.
Negative view on the gaming space, but it's just how I feel and what I've observed. But it's not all doom and gloom. If you've been around my channel, you know that I fucking love indie games and lesser known gems that are more focused on a vision. Japanese games also tend to be more focused, but I'm getting off track, about large companies making games.
Without Horn says, I talk about it more? I might talk about it more because like Dark Souls 2 is the brown standard for video games. Like if it's as bad or worse than Dark Souls 2, boy, does it smell like poo.
There are always going to be companies that prioritize quality in order to maintain a premium image, too. The industry might be creating more slop than ever, but incredible games are always in the pipeline, whether they be from small or massive devs. I think the past few years have been the best in gaming's history. I also got games that I'm currently pretty excited for. Yakuza Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Dragon's Dogma 2, also the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC for Elden Ring, the Ashlands expansion for Valheim, the Seekers of the Storm expansion for Risk of Rain 2. Cool shit coming out. Also, sometimes, companies actually allow a smaller team with a decent amount of time, budget, and no expectations or marketing to attempt to carve out their own niche. Ubisoft funds Rayman games, and their Prince of Persia Metroidvania came out as a critical success. Bethesda are the ones responsible for publishing Hi-Fi Rush, the sudden rhythm action game that dominated the gaming space for a week despite releasing poop shit like Starfield. Dave the Diver is a small and cozy game with a playful variety. It was developed by a subsidiary of a giant company, Nexon. Creativity is not dead in large gaming outlets. These are smaller risks that have been getting...
I didn't know Dave the Diver was published by Nexon, which is kind of funny because Nexon is one of those companies that I've like mentally written off as like super greedy Korean grindy MMO producer type thing, and so I just kind of implicitly grew to have a distaste for them over the years. So it's kind of interesting that this is kind of breaking that mold that's been cast for me already. What, I don't like MapleStory? So MapleStory kind of missed me because that was at a point where like I was old enough that I didn't necessarily play it, or like I didn't have the hardware when like it first came out to enjoy it. So I tried to get into Ragnarok Online for a while, and I was like kind of more interested in Ragnarok Online than MapleStory because I hadn't really heard about it when it first launched. And then after that point, I was too old to like really get into it, like doing like college and stuff. And so, yeah. Okay, I do have more to say about like the Mario stuff, but I'll try to remember it in a moment here.
More and more popular lately. They're casting slightly wider nets with a low cost for varying results, all of which seems at least consistently positive from my POV as a consumer, probably because of the greater control over the direction of projects given to smaller teams. Just try not to have so much brand loyalty and try to keep track of the names of developers in your favorite video games. They are the ones that have dedicated their life to bringing you fun experiences. You don't get into a highly exploitative profession like that without true passion.
All right, so that was a pretty good video. I'm going to go ahead and link it for you guys in the chat, as always. And giving it a like as well. Let me see what else Frogwater has made. Dark Souls is for everyone. Y'all are just haters now. You played Dark Souls 2 and it's not that bad. Oh, he's trying to rage bait me? He is trying to rage bait me. Live on stream. Risk of Rain returns as a remake done right. That's good to hear. I was a really big fan of the original Risk of Rain, but I wasn't too interested in the 3D version of Risk of Rain 2. Like it looked okay, but there was a certain type of charm that I preferred of the original. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a sub and maybe check out some more of his videos sometime. Okay. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And that, you know, gave us a lot of fun stuff to talk about there. So, SNX said, you tried it, it was okay, more of a grindy game. Ragnarok Online had you for years on and off. See, I feel like Ragnarok and MapleStory are like two peas in a pod, where they're like essentially the same spirit of a game, just packaged in different formats. And yeah. So, Mr. Yado is a RuneScape enjoyer. All right, so going back to like the whole Mario stuff, for SNX talking about holding games up to the quality mindset of like Mario 3, the way I feel about it is because so many games are 5s, they're kind of not worth playing because there's going to be so many more 6s. And to be fair, I don't really have enough time to play all of the games between like tier quality, like 9 to 6. So to me, like a base level of a game that I would want to play is like a 7 out of 10, which for me means it's like 2 standards of deviation higher than a 5. So like a game that's a 7 out of 10 in many ways is a game that I want to play like twice as much as I would a 5. I guess it's not like really technically twice. It'd be like more like 4 times, because like a 6 would be twice as much as a 5. But anyway, you should like get the point there. And because I've played so many games throughout my life, I've played like a decent amount of 5s and 6s and a couple of 4s, a couple of 3s, and very few 2s and 1s, because very few games are actually that bad. But it's just not really worth my time investing in a game that isn't that great unless it's kind of like a guilty pleasure. So for me, like one of my consistent guilty pleasure games, which is like a 5 out of 10 that I might go to every couple years, would be something like Dynasty Warriors or like Warriors Orochi. Not because like particularly good, but because like they're just entertaining in a way that's really chill and relaxing for me personally, and it's not something I could ever in good conscience truly recommend to somebody else unless they were kind of into that thing. So why would I compare things to Mario 3 then? It's just because I feel like there are a bunch of games which might not be quite as good as Mario 3, but are pretty close in like different ways. And so whenever I play a new game, I'm subconsciously comparing it to pretty much every other game that I've played. And that means like Suikoden 1, I think is kind of like a 6 out of 10, whereas like Suikoden 2 is kind of like a 9 out of 10 for me. So, and those are just two RPGs that are like stand out to me as like being like really nice, fun games. And Saga Frontier 1 for me is like an 8 out of 10 for me personally, but not everybody's going to see the game that way. And, yeah, it's just like, I can't erase the past, you know? So I want games to be something that I like cherish and want to share with others. I don't want to be like disappointed or feel like they didn't quite live up to their potential. Oh yeah. So Mr. Yada says this discussion makes you think of Pokemon and how even the best of that series still doesn't seem that great compared to a peak like Mario 3. So to be fair, like the actual games of Pokemon are, you know, just barely functional, but functional enough to suggest a promise of something more. And Pokemon has never really been about the games as much as it has been about the idea of Pokemon and the kind of world that it could represent, which is probably why Pal World is taking off as hard as it is right now. And Pokemon was more of an event than a game, especially like when it first came out and really caught on in the US, and pretty much like all over the world that's true. But by this point in time, we're so far divorced from when it first splashed and landed in our like respective countries that a lot of that charm isn't nearly as apparent now as it was when it first came out. Maybe sometime I should like watch a video on stream about like Pokemania and just like trying to describe the atmosphere of getting into Pokemon like right before the Pokemon 2000 came out. Is just like a gargantuan task. Like you just kind of had to have like lived it to understand it. And having like going to the movies with like a friend or like a parent taking you like with their kids, it's just like, and like going to Burger King and getting the Mighty Kids meal that had like the Pokemon toys, it was just ubiquitous. You had the game, the trading card game, the toys that came like in Burger King, then the movie, which like also traded like Pokemon game cards and whatnot. It was just like a force to be reckoned with back then. So games weren't that great. Like Pokemon was never just about the games there. So like absolutely I would agree that like the Mario games are like better, but they were also different, you know? Yeah, Assassin Excited was the real life aspect. Yada says 75% of Pokemon Company's revenue is merchandise. So the way you see it is that the games are excuses to design more guys to sell plushies of. Yeah. KFC did it first with the plushies for Pokemon. I don't remember that, to be honest. I was never like a big fan of KFC as a kid, though. '96. I mean, you might be right. I just don't remember the KFC plushies at all. So, yeah. Mario, I think, is like a really good gold standard for the games, whether it be like Mario 1 as like the base template to compare all other games, and like Mario 3 or like Super Mario World is like the goal for like a lot of games. And of course, like that isn't always like going to be the best point of comparison when you're like moving between genres. Like, how the hell could you compare Call of Duty to Mario? But I mean, there is like still like a kernel of truth in terms of like the engagement and fun you get from like playing those games, which is worthy of consideration as well. But then yeah, it just kind of becomes like genre metrics at that point. Chadwick said a kid died on one of the plastic Pokeballs they came in on. I couldn't remember if that was like a Burger King type thing, but yeah, that was kind of a big issue. I remember hearing something about that when I was a kid. Ask Nick still has those plushies. Seal, Vulpix, Zubat, Dratini. That's a pretty good collection right there. Respectable. But all right, everybody, this stream went a lot longer than I expected. I did not expect me to get so riled up about AAA games needing greed, but here we are, well over time when I was, just trying to fill time earlier. All right, but that'll be it for me for tonight. I'll need to remember to go back and like update my description and tag the appropriate content creators. So I'll try to remember to do that, hopefully tomorrow or something like that. I don't know what I want to watch tomorrow. Maybe some of like Ontos videos, Ontos, but we'll see. Until next time, I hope you guys stay safe and take care. Last Protagonist out.